Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the regular Comox Valley Regional District Board meeting of February 14th to order. Happy Valentine's Day. And I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, the original caretakers of this land, and we are grateful for their past and present stewardship. And as part of our commitment to reconciliation, we continue to educate ourselves and the public on the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. Today we have call to action 18, which is on health. We call upon the federal, provincial, territorial, and Aboriginal governments to acknowledge that the current state of Aboriginal health in Canada is a direct result of previous Canadian government policies, including residential schools, and to recognize and implement the healthcare rights of the Aboriginal people as identified in international law, constitutional law, and under the treaties. And with that, there is an in-camera motion.
Second.
Thank you. And we will move in camera following the regular meeting according to section 91E and K of the community charter. All in favor? Oh, sorry, Director Hillian.
My apologies, Chair. I was trying to catch your attention in response to the reading at the start of the meeting.
Okay.
So after you have this vote, perhaps you'd give me a half a moment.
Yes, so all in favor of going in camera after the regular meeting? Any opposed? That's carried. And go ahead, Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. I know it's not customary to respond to the readings at the start of the meeting that draw attention to our pursuit of truth and reconciliation. But I just wanted to share with the board that I was privileged to have the opportunity to see the film Bones of Crows last night that was presented in the Sid Williams Theatre. And I just want to say that it was a profoundly moving experience. The theater was full, and I would strongly encourage anyone who has the opportunity to take in the film to see it. It's an experience that you won't forget. And in bringing to life the legacy of residential schools and Canada's treatment of Indigenous people and the need for us all to continue to pursue this goal, you couldn't have a better spent 2 or 3 hours. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that. And hopefully there will be another showing of it. It unfortunately fell on the village's council night last night. So yeah, look forward to seeing it in the future. So I do want to welcome Director John Rice from Area D, the Strathcona Regional District, to the board. And in light of his participation today, I'd also like to vary the agenda so that we can bring forward some of his items to the front. Thank you. So we'll bring forward item G13 and H2. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. So moving to G13 first. We have Black Creek Oyster Bay Service Committee minutes for receipt. Arbor and Grieve, thank you. And are there any discussion of those minutes? Okay, and it's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously, and there is a recommendation. Thank you, and that is that the board consider the 3 readings and subsequent adoption of bylaw 735, the Black Creek Oyster Bay Fire Protection Local Service Area Conversion Establishment Bylaw. And is there any further discussion? It is a vote of area C and D. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And that brings us to H2. Which is under bylaws and resolutions. Moved by Arbor, seconded by Grant. Thank you. And this is bylaw 735. And amendment number 8 for first and second reading concurrently. And it's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. And then again for third. Moved by Grieve, seconded by Grant. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And moving back to the regular agenda, we have adoption of minutes for January 24th. Moved by Arbor, seconded by Grant. Any discussion of those minutes? It's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And the minutes for January 31st. Moved by Arbor, seconded by McCollum. Any further discussion? And all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. And we're on to item D, public input in the 2023-2027 financial plan. Moved by Grant, seconded by Arbor, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. We have no specific input for this board meeting tonight. The regional district is receiving some input shared with other committees and commissions as it is brought forward to the relevant services. And just a word out to the public, we have our website under budget inquiries where all available information is on the proposed budget, and you can review that. We also last week conducted a workshop on the financial planning process. That is online, so anybody that did not see it can witness that. The questions around the budget process are answered, and we're available for that. So thank you, board. Nothing more to report at this time. A few more financial plans to come forward later on in the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Russell. That brings us to E1, which is the follow-up to the Young Agrarians delegation that we had on January 24th. Moved by Grant, seconded by Arbor. Any further discussion on the follow-up? Oh, Director Arbor, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I'm trying to recall if we were hoping to come back under new business last board and we never did, or if we just forgot, but I think there was appetite to support their efforts. I would need some staff guidance because I would like to support, as I spoke last time, the initiation of a Young Agrarian for the Mid and North Island. It's a program that's proving quite successful in a number of places. I just don't know where we would situate this in the absence of an agricultural service. I don't know if this is something that would be supported by our municipal colleagues. Otherwise, maybe we would bring it back to rural areas. If the municipal colleagues are interested, then that'd be fantastic. Maybe there'd be a way. But I don't know if staff has some advice, because the contribution, the potential contribution is probably a little beyond what our typical grants, rural grants do. So I don't know if staff has given any thoughts to the request from the Young Agrarian Society.
Not as of yet, but you certainly can refer it to staff to come back with a report that is referred to the EA directors or back to this board. We as staff certainly learned from their presentation, and we will be reaching out to them so that they can be part of the farm plan that is currently being conducted. We'll be reporting on the farm plan process to the EA coming forward. And Lisa, anything else, insight or otherwise, beyond what I've just said? No. So if you'd like to direct a report on options or otherwise, certainly we can come.
I would like that, but to inform that direction, I see Dr. Morin has her. It'd be great to hear from municipalities. I have the interest in this one.
Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just sort of querying how we could, figure out how to support this. I think this is a group that has flown a bit under the radar. I remember asking them during the delegation if they'd been involved in the ag plan and things like that, and they didn't seem to know too much about it. What they're asking for is matched by the province, so there is that, I think, consideration that, if we help them out a bit, there is going to be matching from the province. So it's not us funding the whole thing. So I don't know. I guess I have the same question as Director Arbor, where we could maybe consider this item the best place for it.
Dr. Arbor.
Yeah, so thanks. So based on overwhelming municipal support, I'd like to ask staff to see if they can come back with a report to the board on how we might be able to help the younger areas.
Yeah, thank you. Second.
Director Hardy. Oh, is that who's next? Yes. Oh, no, sorry, it was Director
Oh,
Grasper.
that's okay. I was just wondering, I can't remember if I asked this question last time or not. I'm getting to that age, but is there any landlord tenancy issues if you let someone and they lease your property off you and they're on your property for 10 years and say they build a greenhouse, etc. When it's time to move on, is there any issues with landlord tenants? Because that can be a nightmare for homeowners and trailers and stuff. I just want to be clear before we.
Yeah, no, there certainly is lots of implications in terms of long-term lease and whether that's considered as a subdivision or otherwise. And I think that's the benefit of young agrarians is they're bringing to the table that expert and wisdom to help landowners and potential tenants to navigate these processes to ensure that there aren't unintended consequences and everybody's interests are kept. That's really been the barrier, I think, for the broad use of agricultural land under these terms. And certainly that's the objective of young agrarians is to help people through the process.
Thank you. Now, Director Hardy.
Thanks. I know we had the young agrarians come and give a presentation not too long ago. One of the questions I have is in regards to this regional park service that's being developed and worked on, whether or not the young agrarians with regards to maybe there's a means in regards to in the development of these regional park services acquiring parcels of farmland, calling it park, and having the young agrarians come out and work it. And based upon them working on that property, there's a means of recovering that cost of buying that land and making it into a park. So I just wonder again if the board's considered outside the box, different avenues with regards to helping the young agrarians out. I know we spent over $165 million last year on a park. And, you know, how many pieces of farm property could we have bought last year and put the young agrarians to work?
Thank you. Next, we have Director Grief.
Yeah, just to build on that, some time ago, we had Harold Steves from Richmond come. And that's precisely what they were doing over there is they were actually buying farmland and having incubator farms that coexisted with parks. So there was some, you know, trails or what have you, but next to working farmland, and they were bringing in young farmers to lease the land or to, you know, get up to speed on farming in general. So, you know, maybe if we're going to come back with a report, I think there's a lot of information out there that already exists. I know that we had discussions with a major dairy operation in Comox who has no living heirs, and the proposal was that he bequeath the land to the RD and we keep it in farming. So it may be an option coming up with our regional parks, something that would you know, be a win-win for both the residents and for young farmers. So I think that it should be part of the what's coming back to us when we get a report.
Okay, Director Cole-Hamilton.
Great, thanks, Chair. And I just want to thank Director Arbor and Director Morin for bringing forward the idea that we should get a staff report with some options. And I hear, you know, other ideas coming from Director Hardy. So clearly there's many ways to get at this. I just wanted to, I guess, confirm that the staff report would contain both sort of options for the ASC and options for this board, sort of explore all the possible places that it could live such that we can just weigh them and make a choice.
Madam Chair, yes, certainly. We'll first drill into the specifics of the young agrarians request, but try and address some of the issues and ideas that we've heard here from you as well.
Okay, Director Hilling, go ahead.
Thanks. Just for the record, can I clarify, did we spend $165 million on a park last year?
No, and I could just ask Doug maybe to clarify what was spent by the regional district on parks. It certainly wasn't 165 million. Thanks, Doug. You go, Press.
Thank you. Through the chair, we did spend 1.6 million on a park acquisition along Spike Road. I can't recall if the Morrison Creek one was last year or the year before, but it wouldn't exceed more than 1.8 million.
Director Hardy.
My apologies, there was probably a couple more zeros behind that.
Just the wrong decimal place. Yeah. Okay, so I don't see any further lights on. We actually weren't on receipt, so if there was a motion, we have already dispensed with receipts. So the motion on the table was to direct staff to come back with the report on the young agrarians. And that's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
Move one. Second.
And report one is the fracture on Fifth after action report.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and Howie Siemens, the manager of our emergency program, is here to introduce the report.
Great, thank you, Russell, and good afternoon, Madam Chair and directors and staff. I'm here today for the opportunity to provide you an outline of the highlights of a fracture on Fifth regional exercise that was delivered September 25th, 2022. Through the facilitation of Callian Group, who will be presenting a little bit later, our contracted design and delivery. The exercise was based closely on a 1946 earthquake that actually hit the Comox Valley in the Forbidden Plateau area. Above the incredible regional collaboration and teamwork and learning outcomes that came from this exercise, it also provided us an opportunity to create tools to review and use in the future to help us guide the emergency management program for the Comox Valley. Those being a short exercise video, which we'll show you in a minute, and an after action report developed by Callian Group. So very supportive contributions and feedback and acknowledgement from the many over 200 plus participants involved in design, training, and delivery it took to deliver that exercise. First, we would like to show you the short fracture on Fifth video to set the stage before I introduce the Callian Group representative that's with us today by Zoom and who will report on the after action report. And I think Lisa's queuing that up for us now.
Still trying to find it.
Okay. It's also on our, you got it, okay.
So having some technical difficulties with the video.
I think it's also on our website, the emergency management website as well, if you need a live link. We were in an earthquake, so there's really level 3.
Okay.
Working the dry run.
Just lip sync now.
Yeah, I can speak over I speak over the whole entire thing. Yeah.
You got a haircut.
Yeah, I did it. Yeah, I think I saw that and I said I needed it. So yeah. It should be on the website, live link on the website. Yeah, under the exercise. Yeah. Sorry, everybody. It'll be under our emergency management page, under services. Top. Yeah, under there, yeah, should be a link under there. Should have been on it. There it is right there. Fracture on the left column. It says fracture on 5th exercise. Yeah, keep going with your mouse up higher, right there. That should take it to the exercise. There we go. Well done.
On September 27th, 2022, the Comox Valley Emergency Program, with partners Comox Valley Regional District, City of Courtenay, Town of Comox, Village of Cumberland, and Comox First Nation, hosted the Fracture on 5th Earthquake Regional Training Exercise, utilizing the CVRD's Emergency Operations Center, also known as an EOC, on Harmston Avenue.
So we were doing an earthquake, but it was really about regional collaboration for opening a level 3 emergency operations center, but also to support other local governments that when we need to do sort of collaboration together for a large scale, any kind of large scale event, wildfire, flood, pandemics, heat waves. This is where we were hoping that we'd all be able to come and work together and share our resources and collaborate in sort of close confinements instead of just through email processes. So
the training exercise was based on a historical 7.3 magnitude earthquake that struck the Comox Valley in 1946. The purpose of the exercise was to support staff, volunteers, and partner agencies to gain experience coordinating and supporting disaster response and coordination at the site level, and within a regional emergency operations center model and reception center environments.
Well, the biggest thing is to really provide opportunities for personnel, volunteers, just to get more comfortable with an event before it actually unfolds, or just re-looking at some of their operational guidelines that they might already use for other events. I think we did quite well with that.
The exercise scenario and events were co-developed by a regional exercise design team with guidance from Callion Group, a Canadian company which specializes in developing and evaluating highly realistic emergency management exercises. During the day, a variety of training events occurred. Pre-designated roads in the downtown Courtenay area were closed to support an evacuation order scenario in a residential area led by local RCMP and Comox Valley Ground Search and Rescue. Residents who volunteered to participate as evacuees displaced from their homes were guided to a reception center managed by Emergency Support Services. There, evacuees were supported by volunteers specializing in first aid, reunification services, and provided referrals for food, lodging, clothing, and emotional supports. 2 tabletop exercises were also conducted around potential disruptions in water and sewer infrastructure and services in an earthquake scenario. In each setting, staff and responders and volunteers were able to collaborate and practice as a team their roles in an operational setting, guided by the Emergency Program Act legislation, local emergency guidelines, plans, and procedures, as well as to gain and share new skills in a safe and controlled learning environment. Key contributors to the exercise were Comox Valley Emergency Support Services, Comox Valley Emergency Radio Communications, Comox Valley Search and Rescue, Courtenay RCMP, Callion Group, and the Regional Exercise Design Team, who collaborated for over 2 years to help plan and develop Fracture on 5th. Mutual aid was provided by St. John's Ambulance and Emergency Support Services volunteers from Comox Valley, Campbell River, and Quadra Island. The Comox Valley Emergency Program has also developed new regional emergency planning relationships with CFB Comox 19 Wing and Community Care's Peer Outreach, who were also involved during Fracture on 5th. We thank them for their substantial participation on Exercise Day. An exercise of this scope has never before been held in the region and took over 2 years to design. But because of Fracture on 5th, our community has become better prepared if an event of this magnitude should ever occur. Residents of the Comox Valley are encouraged to learn more about how to be self-sufficient during emergency or disaster, starting with an emergency kit, a supply of drinking water, and a simple emergency plan for your household members and pets. For more information, visit www.comoxvalleyrd.ca/getprepared.
Great, thanks, Leah. As you can see from the video, it took a large regional team effort to lead, coordinate, and operate the many site activities for this exercise, which were required during any major event. Though I have shared this before, I want to once again take this opportunity to acknowledge all now volunteers, agencies, organizations, Comox Valley municipalities, and the Region and Comox First Nations for their contributions and support in making this a very successful regional virtual emergency operations center. Caledon has now created this very valuable tool, the Fracture on 5th After Action Report, that will allow us to review and use now for planning and improving emergency management for the Comox Valley. With that, I would like to now introduce Vanessa Howard from the Caledon Group to provide you with her presentation on the After Action Report.
Thank you very much, Howie. Thank you, Madam Chair, directors, and staff. With your permission, I'll share my screen and begin my presentation.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you.
Are you able to share? Okay, great.
Yes, you should be able to see it there.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I wanted to begin by simply thanking you for sharing some of your time with me. It's my pleasure to provide you with this overview regarding the Fracture on 5th exercise, which Howie's already well introduced to you. One only needs to spend a few minutes on any kind of media to understand the devastation that can be created by natural hazards when they impact our communities. The plans, the experiences, and relationships built during this process demonstrated to me the commitment of staff and volunteers across the region. It was a pleasure to play a role in this regional activity, and it's my honor to present this information to you today. While I live here on Vancouver Island, Caledon's headquarters are in Ottawa. We're a trusted resilience partner across Canada and internationally. And although we work in many industries, collectively, they paint a picture of a resilient Canada. We give our clients the confidence they need to communicate, innovate, learn, and lead safe and healthy lives. The importance of continual program evolution can't be overstated. And I would really like to thank the board and the emergency management team for the opportunity to work with your community on this important initiative. Emergencies that impact residents are dynamic and can be very stressful for responders, for decision makers, and the community. Activities such as the exercise Fracture on 5th, and perhaps more importantly, the discussions and plans undertaken in the lead up to the actual exercise help everyone make better decisions for future emergencies. As I present this, we still have people displaced by British Columbia provincial emergencies. I also can't help but think of the devastation caused globally by earthquakes and other disasters, which highlight the importance of emergency management and disaster risk reduction. I'll go further into our process and findings shortly. However, I really did want to reiterate my thanks. The challenges faced by disasters are real. You have emergency program staff who are experts in emergency management and personally work year-round to prepare for and respond to emergencies. The frequency and severity of emergencies impacting British Columbia is notable, and it puts an enormous strain on these people. But the strain is also felt by responders, often volunteers in your community, the residents you all represent, and yourselves. I truly appreciate the trust you've placed in Calian to perform this work and acknowledge the important work you do to support this critical program. Exercises are much more than the activities that occur on the day. And frankly, an earthquake can be a very intimidating scenario to tackle because the consequences may be very widespread. The planning team defined the activities and objectives, but then had to really dig into which department would need to perform particular activities in order to be successful. So in addition to exercise design meetings, the team spent time refining and building out detailed plans that would support the resilience of the region for any type of disaster, not just an earthquake. In order to really meet the needs of participants, there were several customized training sessions developed and delivered. This included targeted training related to key processes necessary to run an EOC effectively. Midway through the project, we all began facing the impacts of COVID. The team identified there was value in delaying the exercise date in order to allow in-person activity, despite that meaning all deadlines needed to be reevaluated. Fortunately, this gave us the opportunity to develop a regional policy group exercise for elected officials. And although the province has recommended regional EOCs for some time, they haven't yet been fully embraced by the region across the province. So when the Comox Valley aligned in a regional response, you really pioneered this long recognized best practice. Your team worked through the successes and the challenges associated with a regional EOC during the pandemic, which gave us an opportunity to use the regional policy group exercise to understand from the view of elected officials what went well and what was a challenge. The resulting after action review, AAR, helped define how to build those lessons and processes into future regional EOCs. And throughout the discussions, the region championed a truly regional approach, inclusive of the Comox First Nation. The Comox Nation will be integral in a regional emergency response, and the Comox Valley Emergency Program worked through the process to ensure not only inclusion, but also to expand the knowledge of elected officials, EOC staff, and volunteers regarding the importance of walking side by side with the Comox First Nation as distinct governments who, through both relationships and geographical connectivity, will be really important partners during all phases of disaster risk reduction. Due to the time and space caused by the pandemic, several training initiatives were undertaken to ensure that as we ramped up exercise development, we also made sure exercise participants were well supported as well. There were specialty sessions designed and delivered by Calian or the Comox Valley Emergency Program to support the distinct participant groups. And of course, the last and first next phase, the exercise day itself and the AAR that accompanies it, provides an opportunity to perform the roles necessary to respond to an emergency, but also builds the foundation for the next series of priorities to continually improve your region's ability to respond to, recover from, and mitigate the consequences of future disasters. Participants were provided pre and post exercise surveys to help understand the growth in either awareness or understanding or confidence through the exercise process. And as you can see from this visual, there was an increase in confidence or understanding across all EOC related questions. Jordan Wall's quote amplifies what we all observed. The local governments, stakeholders, and partners throughout the region provide a depth of knowledge. The training provided throughout this process added to the existing depth and will provide you with the flexibility in responding to emergencies in the future. Similarly, the ESS staff or volunteers also described a growth in knowledge and capabilities. This team of volunteers not only worked well within their existing teams, but they also integrated neighboring teams and other volunteer groups into an effective ESS response. The findings are articulated in the after action report, but were broadly categorized as they relate to the EOC, reception center, technology or exercise design, and general findings. Each finding is supported by either survey data or observations in order to ensure that all of the findings are rooted in your team's experience and community level of expertise. The value of a multi-year training plan is widely accepted across all sectors. It allows for a natural progression of skills, creates regular access points that keep skills current, is more cost-effective than looking at training as independent activities, and builds upon the success of previous activities in a logical and efficient way. This proposed multi-year training plan was developed in order to address the findings from the exercise. It integrates priorities for growth into existing processes wherever possible through workshops, lunch and learn sessions, while also creating targeted training sessions for key personnel when needed in a logical and progressive way. As you can see, it builds in complexity until a full-scale exercise in 2027. By following such a training program, your team will continue to deepen the capability to be resilient in the face of hazards while building up those critical skills and relationships that we all are depending on. And with that, I'd like to just thank you again for sharing your time with me. I'll stop sharing my screen and can answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you, Vanessa. I don't see any lights on for questions. So thank you for that report. Oh, go ahead, Director Morin.
I just wanted to say thank you. It was I didn't have much information about how it all went, and it's really interesting. I did notice I guess someone who gained some fame. I noticed Director Hillian's partner was in the exercise, so it looks like you got a lot of great participation. So thank you. It was really interesting to read the report and see the video. Thanks.
Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the reports and the presentation. Yeah, it was a great exercise. I just did want to provide the feedback that my street was the one that was evacuated, and my neighbors were there getting their arms bandaged up and such. And of course, they all willingly participated. The only grumbling was that they would have appreciated knowing ahead of time how long they were actually going to spend there, which I think was probably realistic given the exercise. But because it was just an exercise, I think some forewarning the next time around might be worthwhile.
Through the chair, Director, yeah, we realized there was a time. It all depends on the skill levels of our volunteers and how they do their paperwork and forms. And so, yeah, we do apologize. It took a little longer than we thought, but that's the whole idea of the exercise. So.
Yeah, no apology necessary, but just I think just forewarning residents would be a good step to build in next time around. Thanks very much. Thanks.
And I noticed in the video you had longer hair, Howie. Hopefully that wasn't a result of the hair loss from the event.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's my budget cut.
All right, thanks again. Okay, so we are on receipt. All in favor of receipt? That's unanimous. Thank you. And recommendation moved by Hillian, seconded by Grieve. is that we direct staff to bring forward the plans from the after action report and that we communicate the report's findings to our partners. Is there any further discussion? Okay, it's a vote of areas A, B, and C. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Yeah, maybe next time we vote on it won't be just the areas. I'm not sure. Anyway, moving on to item 2, development cost charge exemptions. Moved by Grant, second by Cole Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair and Directors. And Mark Rutten is here to present this report. It's a follow-up to a request you had for further information on DCCs at the January 24th board meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. Through the CAO and through the chair. Each time a new connection is made to the water or sewer systems, it places an additional incremental burden on those systems. And development cost charges are collected from developers to offset some of the infrastructure costs incurred to service the needs of those development and to compensate for that burden. The Local Government Act includes the ability to waive or reduce DCCs for several classes of eligible development, and not-for-profit rental housing and supportive housing are included in those possible waivers. Whenever DCCs are waived for a certain type of housing, the DCC charge for all of the other types of housing increases. So by providing a waiver, the board is signaling that a specific type of development is encouraged and financially supported by the local community. When the CBRD's DCC bylaws were updated in 2019, a waiver was included for the construction of secondary suites, but not for any other type of supportive housing. DCC bylaws are not easy to update, and anything more than a minor change requires the full provincial review process to be completed. So the report does suggest that that water and sewer DCC charges are a good place to investigate waivers, that they're next planned to be updated in 2024. And that would be a good opportunity for the board to consider waiving DCCs for certain types of supportive housing. And I'm happy to answer any questions on the staff report.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, we have some questions, starting with Director Grant.
Yeah, thank you. I know we talked about this once before, but one of the things that we're looking at is more advocacy with the province. And I really think that this is a provincial issue, that they should be actually funding this properly when they send, when they give money for projects, they should actually be taking development cost charges and such into account when they do it, so that we don't have people coming, because when we waive them, it just, everybody else gets to pay. We're out the money at that point. And I think the province could step up here and actually do this properly. So I'd like to see us, when we do meet, or when we get the opportunities with senior government, that we advocate for them to actually buck up and pay the charge for this.
Yeah, maybe that could be added. We do have an advocacy plan coming forward. Maybe that could be added to the list. Thank you. And Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate Director Grant's comments. I think advocacy to the province to help us out more is always important. If we were looking at updates in 2024, can you give a bit of a timeline on how long that process would start and when we would actually, if we were to update, when we'd actually be able to utilize that? Just because, obviously, I mean, we do have construction projects, so obviously that go on for a while and may just work out to be perfect timing, but just wanted to get a bit of a sense of the timeline.
Yeah, in the staff report, I do mention that there are 2 big studies that are underway in water and sewer. They're master planning studies. And I think today at the Water Committee, Chris reported that at the Sewage Commission, that the master plan's in good shape there, and we're just about done, ready to report out later this year. And for water, we're a bit further behind. We still have to start the work. Once those are completed, there's likely about a 6-month time to prepare the updated DCC report and then look to bring the bylaws forward. So I would say by the end of 2024, we could have new bylaws in place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Director Hardy.
Yeah, thanks. I'm again going back to it's the WHA Affordable Housing Project. waiting until 2024 to amend bylaws, I don't think is going to help the WHA Friendship Center and the affordable housing project that they're working on. Again, I remind this CVRD in regards to their commitment with regards to reconciliation. And I don't take that word lightly. And I don't imagine most folks at this board table do either. So I think a significant request was put forward by an Indigenous group for the board to consider. And I guess one of the other things, another closing remark in regards to affordable housing is being Indigenous, growing up as a kid in the Valley and recognizing the fact that there are oftentimes we were turned away from an affordable apartment that we could go and stay in because we were Indian. Right now, we have an opportunity to provide an avenue for Indigenous peoples to go and stay in a facility that's going to be safe for them. And I think the CVRD, like I said before in previous meetings, needs to walk the way they talk in regards to reconciliation. And to me, this is a perfect example where the CVRD could step up to the plate and do that. And I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think, this report is specific to the development cost charge exemptions, but we will be speaking more directly toward the WHA requests later in the agenda. Director Arbor?
Yeah, thanks. And that's those are good comments from both. If staff maybe can correct me, but I believe we already made a contribution to the project in the past, and we're considering maybe new supports. The DCC issue is a larger one, and I think the staff report does a pretty good job to outline the opportunities and constraints around that one. But I'm fully in favor of. In the rural areas, it's a little bit different here, so it would take some consideration. But I think if we could waive the DCCs for all affordable housing projects, I think that's something that I can justify to residents. We're in a deep housing crisis. We're seeing the province throwing spaghetti at the wall for the last 10 years on policies that are still not grabbing a hold. And if DCC, if that's one other form where we ask our residents to contribute a little more, I realize we need to go to service by service and all the rest of that. But I'd be really interested in seeing us reduce that burden. And I think it's great that group came to us with that option, knowing that it's a possibility, a difficult one, but a possibility.
Okay, back to Director Hardy.
Thanks. And in regards to, I know the earlier part of January, we had a lawyer come in and provide us, the board, with regards to advice on the ability to turn around and amend bylaws and have bylaws changed relatively quickly. So again, with regards to waiting till 2024 to amend a bylaw, to me, just doesn't make sense in regards to what's being asked from this organization. And I know Chair Kettler said that this conversation with regards to WHA is going to be put off till a little bit later on. Thanks.
Okay, and Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, speaking with residents, especially during the election period, affordable housing was the #1 issue on the minds of people. Affordability in general, but especially affordable housing. So I'd like to just indicate my general support for waiving DCCs for support of affordable housing projects.
Okay. I don't see any further lights. So we are on receipt. And if there is a motion after that, we can discuss it then. All in favor of receipt? And that's carried unanimously. Is there any direction for staff in regard to the report that was put forward? Director Cole-Hamilton?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm not sure if staff are inferring from the conversation around the room that we'd like to see options on development charge, with the waiving of development charges for affordable housing projects as the renewal process occurs. So I'm just curious as to whether that's something that requires any kind of formal guidance or whether that's already been taken.
An action for the board on the DCC matter would be to refer this report to the Water Committee and the Sewage Commission for their consideration of providing for waivers to affordable housing projects through their DCC projects that they will be undertaking in the future. That's an option to you.
All right, well, I'll make a motion to that effect then.
They're just on receipt of the report.
No,
Sorry.
we've already moved.
Apologies.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're not on receipt. So basically what Russell said.
Yeah, so I think that it's being put up on screen. It's been seconded, yeah. Moved by Cole Hamilton, seconded by Director Hillian. And while we're waiting, Director Arbor, go ahead.
Oh, that's on the motion now.
We're on the motion.
Yeah, so totally in favor. I would still like to point out that it doesn't nix other strategies. And I think overall as a region, what we lack is a strategy for housing. We have a housing needs assessment, but we don't have a strategy. DCCs is a tactic. Now, I happen to think that this is a good one, and in the absence of a strategy, we need to keep plugging away at it. But I think this board should also wrap its mind around developing a strategy so that we better understand how everything is interconnected. Thanks.
Thank you. And Director Grant.
Yeah, maybe Kevin could tell us how much are the DCCs for the regional district piece? Do you have an idea? I caught him on that one.
Is the question for this project?
Sure, yeah.
For this project, there's a link to the previous staff report that we provided at the time of the meeting. Just one moment. It was $330,000. That's both for water and sewer for the regional districts portion.
Okay. And so maybe I'm a little bit confused here, but I'm just trying to figure out, like, for a single unit, what would you pay for DCCs for water and sewer? This is right.
So I'll ask Mark Rutton.
You can get back to me later. I'm fine with that.
Just one moment.
I just want to know what we're actually getting into.
Yeah, Mark should be able to.
Yeah, I don't have the bylaws in front of me, but it's about 3,000 for water and 6,000 for sewer.
Okay. All right, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, so. Oh. Director Morin, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I know this is theoretically going to be sent off to water and sewer. I just wanted to point out that, there can be obviously criteria within that broad definition of affordable housing. So I guess wanting to ensure that the projects that are really hitting the mark are the ones that maybe take priority or whatever. So I think hopefully that's correct, that, there's discretion if we go down this path to not necessarily fund, everything, but really those high priority that are really delivering, I guess. Thanks.
Director Grieve.
Yeah, to remind everybody, it's not us that are funding it, it's the taxpayers. But we're jumping ahead a little bit because when we get to item 4, function 451, we're looking to take $116,314 out of that function to put towards the DCCs of this project, correct? Now, my question is, if we did that, I mean, would we have to wait until the tax requisitions come in August before we could actually transfer those funds? Maybe that scenario.
I think there's 2 questions. The second question I'll leave and maybe ask Kevin to respond to when the monies would be available if it was requisitioned as proposed later on in the agenda. I just want to be clear, the referral of this report to the Water Committee and Sewage Commission is asking them to, in their processes of developing new DCCs, to consider waivers for this. And there will be a fulsome process that will be defined as to what it applies to and debated and considered, and the financial implications will be built into the DCC bylaws. And as Mark said, the timeline for that is, 2024. It
Yeah.
does not address YG and their immediate request, which you may consider under item number 4 on the agenda when which is really the only option we have for immediate funding. And Kevin, can you answer the question as to when that funding would be available?
I know in government circles, immediate is never immediate.
So through the chair to the director. So yeah, normally with any of the kind of ongoing rural community grants, for example, that we provide, typically we will, kind of wait until we do get our annual tax requisitions to fund those. However, we do have to continue to operate year round in absence of those requisitions. So obviously we would be taking a look at our cash flow situation, whether we had sufficient dollars in hand to expend those dollars early, whether we could fund those through some other means. So, once, we kind of had a sense of what was being asked, we would certainly take a look at what our current situation is and then make a call at that point.
Thank you. Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to quickly respond to 2 comments. Director Arbor indicated we don't have a strategy, and Director Moran raised some concerns about what would be considered affordable housing. While those are both valid points, we do have a process, and that is that we have a coalition to end homelessness, and we administer grants to that organization, and they make recommendations as to which project should be funded. And that is our process. And I think that will come up as an issue when we raise this, when we consider WACHE a little later on in the agenda. I'm 100% in favor of supporting WACHE, as I will state at that time. But I don't believe that their need for these funds is pressing at the moment. They're looking to maximize or to minimize their mortgage payments once this project is actually up and running, and they're not in immediate need of these funds. They can wait while we sort this out at this table for a few months, according to what Mr. Kishi said last time. Thanks.
Thank you. And Director Arbor.
Thanks. I wasn't going to speak again, but I may have a small amendment, or maybe the CO has a recommendation. And just to Director Hillian, I think the strategy can include bylaws and OCPs, not just a coalition. I see housing as being written large here. But for us, we also have these CCs in the rural areas, as was brought up. So can there be a referral to ESC? Because we have, Union Bay or Black Creek, there's consideration of DCC as well. And I think we should have a full regional approach on this and refer it to they're all distinct services, but I'm just wondering if we should add the electoral area services committee to this motion.
Madam Chair, yes, the director is correct. There are DCCs through our local services, and referring this also to the EASC would be the means of undertaking that.
Okay. And Director Grant, go ahead.
Right. Well, thanks. Thanks, Doug, for bringing up that, because one of the concerns I had was how you delineate who gets the money and who doesn't, and Wendy the same. Because we're talking about 40 units and $330,000. You can spend $1 million like nothing in this if you're not careful. And I think this is why I wanted to really go hard on advocating the advocacy for the province, because again, this is money that we end up not collecting and then having to go to the taxpayer for. So there's no free ride here. I think you really have to be careful how much you do this and which projects you do it with. And there's some that will be really good. WACHE could be one of them, but this could be a money pit really fast. So I think you really got to pay attention here.
Thank you. And Director Moore.
Thank you. Just wanted to weigh in. You kind of tweaked me, Director Grant, that when I brought up the idea of looking at criteria, I think what Director Hardy has brought up is hugely important. I'm going to kind of give a teaser to the equity policy workshop that's coming up that social planning is putting on. That some of our policy will have more, I hope, would have more of an equity lens, meaning that perhaps a development like WACHE that has the Indigenous component, we know that Indigenous folks are disproportionately affected in all areas, that those might be things that take priority over other projects. I mean, it may not mean that everything, even if it's quote affordable, may not get the same level of support, not that it's not worthy. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think sometimes there's good reasons why a particular project needs more funding than another because they're already not, there's not an equitable situation. If that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is before you on the screen. I don't see any further lights. It's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so off of development cost charges and onto the proposed financial plan for 2023-2027. Moved by Grieve, seconded by Arbor, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and Kevin DeVal will just provide a brief introduction to the financial planning process, and then we'll get on with a number of the service budgets for your consideration.
Thank you again, Russell, through the chair to the directors. Good afternoon. So yes, we are well underway with our annual financial planning process. We kicked off presenting you with our consolidated financial plan back on January 24th. And since that time, we've been presenting a number of budgets to our various committees and commissions in that time. In front of you today will be 8 budget presentations for your consideration. And so subsequently on the February 28th board agenda, there will be 5 budget reports covering a total of 8 budgets for your consideration then. So we'll be kind of moving into the budget presentation stage, and then certainly there'll be lots of opportunities for questions from the directors after each of those presentations.
Okay, thank you. So that takes us to item 4, which is the homelessness support service. Oh, sorry. Do we need to vote on? Okay, vote on receipt. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, now to the homelessness support service. McCollum and Cole Hamilton, thank you.
Thank you very much. And Lisa Kilpatrick is here to present this budget and will be aided by the coalition as well.
Good evening. Just waiting for Lisa so we're looking at the staff presentation first. So through the chair to the directors, I'm here with Chris Bate, who is part of the leadership team from the Comox Valley Coalition to End Homelessness. So I'm going to start off just giving an overview of and summary of the budget recommendations that are in front of you. And then Chris will speak a little bit to the coalition, what the coalition is, what they did in 2022, some of their highlights. He'll speak to the recommendations for 2023. And then he'll also speak to a conversation that the coalition had, I think, last week regarding the DCCs, and we'll share some recommendations that they wish to share with the board that came out of that conversation. Yeah, I mean, I think we can. I can also speak without the presentation. Any preference,
not
Chair?
able to access that folder.
So would you like me just to provide a verbal summary?
Yes,
Yeah.
if you could.
Okay, no problem. So it sounds like many of you have a handle on this service. So the 451 is our homelessness support service, and it is in place to provide funding to local nonprofits to address homelessness needs in our valley. We don't have any staff allocated to the service. However, we do look to the coalition to provide recommendations for funding. We also provide funding support to the coalition for a coordinator position that helps the coalition team with these recommendations. Historically, the funding the recommendations that have come from the coalition have really supported project planning as well as the bricks and mortar. And they certainly have leveraged thousands of dollars of CBRD funds into additional dollars to support the building of affordable units in our valley. In 2021, we completed a service review that's required by bylaw. And in 2023, we're going to be continuing to explore and implement the recommendations that came from that service review. It will also be an opportunity for us, if directed by the board, to examine DCs through this service. And then in addition, and Alana will be speaking to this further, we will be coordinating that review with a review of our 450 service, which is our emergency shelter and homelessness land acquisition service. So this is an opportunity for us to really take a look at both services that we have with the regional district to see how we can best affect coordination between those services so that we can really examine the impacts and the potential impacts that we can have on affordable housing. So in the staff report in front of you, we have made a recommendation to increase the requisition over and above what was the initial posted financial plan. So it is the increase over that posted plan that I will speak to. Thank you, Lisa. So what we are seeing in 2023 is a total impact of $14.24 on households assessed at $800,000. So in 2022, am I switching this? Perfect. Ooh, too fast. I kind of like going without it. Okay, there we go. Some significant work was done in 2022, and with an allocation of $235,000. We're missing a zero there. We had $75,000 that went towards the capital cost and to renovate and expand Connect. And that was something that the board approved in the fall to increase supports for folks, the unhoused. We had $115,000 going towards the Watche Affordable Housing Project. We had $10,000 towards the construction of one of the townhouses that Habitat for Humanity is working on. And then we also had the $30,000 for the support to the coordinator, and then $5,000 to support honorary to engage individuals with lived experience. That was the wrong direction. Okay, great. So as I mentioned, we are speaking to the recommendation to maximize the requisition. So these are changes to the posted to 2023 budget, and this is following the request from the board in January 24th, to the board on January 24th to waive the CCs for Watche Affordable Housing Development. So what the net increase is over 2022 is $772,314, and which results in a maximum requisition of $421,314. So with $421,000, what we are recommending is that we support, and you'll see in Chris's presentation, the maximum recommendation from the coalition of $250,000. They presented staff with 3 scenarios. So we're recommending scenario 3. $70,000 would support a 2022 unit build in Cumberland. An additional $75,000 towards Watche, and this is for further construction costs, not the DCCs, and $30,000 to the townhouse units in that Habitat Humanity is building, the ones that were also supported in 2022. However, this is to ensure that 2 of the units are constructed adaptable to accessible needs. And then we have 75,000 towards the development or purchase of a 1-unit home or a 1-unit to house 4 to 5 queer youth. Here we go. Oh, there. I'm really not pressing it all these times. Okay. Oh, geez. Okay, there we go. So we are also recommending 40,000 go to the administration of the coalition, as we've supported in the past, the 30,000 towards the coordinator position. And then the coalition has asked for a $5,000 increase to 10,000 for honorary to engage individuals with lived experience. And Chris will share what that has enabled in this past year. The final recommendation is to provide $116,314, approximately 1/3 of the DCC costs for the Wache Affordable Housing Project. And then in addition, just to recognize that we do have a surplus moving forward from 2022 and to acknowledge that we still have that 91,000 carry forward from the Strengthening Community Service Grant, that once we know whether or not that those funds will be provided from that grant, we'll bring that back to the board. So I think maybe, Chris, if I could turn it over to you and maybe hold questions to the end, or would?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Do I get a little clicker thing too, or do you?
You have to share.
It's the little
I
things.
think
that
it's
count.
most effective if you point it at Lisa here. Yeah.
Okay, that was my next question.
speaking on behalf of the coalition, indicating similarly that they would prefer that funds not that item 4 in the recommendation related to this not be approved today. But in that letter, she indicates that the effect of that recommendation might be realized in any case if it went through the regular coalition process. So that seems to be a little bit at odds with what you're saying about not wanting to see those funds going to that purpose at all.
So I'm actually not familiar with the letter you're talking about. Heather, Ms. Ney is not actually a member of the leadership team at this point. So if she sent the letter from CVTS, that's probably the position of CVTS, not the coalition.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't want to be vague, but that's not coming from the coalition.
Fair enough. I believe it is coming from her in her role as Comox Flight Transition Society. But what you're saying clearly is that the coalition does not want to see these funds going towards reduction or elimination of DCCs, and primarily because you feel that may diminish the fund to the and have adverse effects on projects that would otherwise get funded.
That's correct, Director Hillian.
Okay, thanks.
Director Morin.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to bring up as well. It sounds like Heather Ney is speaking on behalf of CVTS. And it actually is in agreement with what you've said, just with a bit of a nuance there, just talking about how there is a process through the coalition, and this kind of, maybe us doing this kind of circumvents that process that you already have. But would it be fair to say that maybe the WACHE request maybe would be considered within the coalition, maybe not called DCCs, but there could be consent, agreement by consensus that, they get funds, but maybe not calling it DCCs. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that if the decision was left up to the coalition to use the process that it normally uses, it could perhaps address some of those issues, but just through a different avenue. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it could possibly, Director Morin. The difference in doing it through the process that you're describing is that we would be looking at the request in light of several other requests sitting on the table at the same time.
For sure.
And it's rare for every agency to get everything they request. In the very early years of the HSS, it did happen a couple of times, simply because not that many agencies were applying for it.
Right.
But in recent years, the requests are looked at collectively, and we sort of we determine where we can give less and where we can give more based on looking at everything together.
Yeah, thank you. I know we're not on the particular item yet about, we're sort of jumping ahead here, but I guess when I saw, that the WACHE was supposed to come out, I did think that it is sort of changing the nature of what your process is and your decision making. And so I did have some concerns about that. I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Director McCollum.
Yeah, the discussion around the DCC ask is, I think, really helpful leading into the various recommendations that we're going to be considering. And I shared a similar reservation about them when we discussed them last time, that given that they are such a big piece of a project, if the board starts using this service to fund that and setting a precedent, it really is going to circumvent the amount of funding that's available for the initiation of projects. And instead, it's reducing the final cost. And what we want is to see that number of on the screen go up is as much as we can leverage with such a small amount of money that we have to resource the service. So I appreciate you providing that clarity. And then the other question I had was, we're contemplating whether or not to do a maximum requisition or do what has been historically levied. And so the asks that have been provided around this $250,000 figure, that's just based on the historical amount that we've provided. It's not that equals all the needs of the coalition on any given year. It's basically working that number backwards. Am I right?
That's correct, Director McCollum. Yeah, we've the last 3, maybe 5 years, I'd have to look back for sure, but we have typically given a range of scenarios for consideration by the CBRD. And of course, the one we always push for is the one that provides the greatest amount of funding for each agency.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any further questions, but I did want to say that that the coalition has been really wonderful, and I absolutely support the consensus decision-making model that you have there with all the nonprofits. And if they've directed in a certain way, I have confidence that that wonderful process was followed to make those recommendations, and that we should give it the seriousness that it deserves.
Thank you.
So we are on receipt, and if we want to move some recommendations, we'll have to come off receipt. So all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Moved by Hillian, seconded by Morin, and recommendation 1 is regarding the Comox Valley Coalition and Homelessness Housing Plan and the allocations that you see on the screen for the 2023 year. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Recommendation 2, moved by Grieve, seconded by Cole Hamilton, is that $40,000 be allocated to the coalition for both the coordinator position and for honoraria for peers. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Oh, sorry, Director Hillian, go ahead.
Yeah, just to note, Chair, that you generally indicate who has the votes, and I believe Comox doesn't vote on this one. Is that correct?
Yes, sorry, all these recommendations having to do with the homelessness support service. It's a tax that the town of Comox does not pay into. They have their own funds that they pay separately. So they do not have a vote in any of the following recommendations for the HSS service. Thanks for that clarification. So on recommendation 2, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 3. Moved by Arbor, seconded by Hillian. And that's the function reflect an increase of $176,000 from $245,000 to $421,000 for the 2023 year. Any further discussion? Sorry, I'm looking who's first. I can't see. Oh, Director McCollum, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question about the figure that we're using for the increase, because it says that it's an increase from the 245,000, but the requisition for 2022 I thought was over 300,000. So I'm just wanting some clarity.
And Madam Chair, Kevin DeVal will answer the question.
Thank you very much, through the chair to the director. So yes, you are correct. Last year we did requisition 350,000 in this particular service. However, in the current 2023-27 financial plan for 2023, we had indicated a proposed requisition of 245. So that's why we're kind of structuring it that way, depending on what the directors decide to do with the request from WACHE, that could then impact what you ultimately decide for a 2023 requisition, because we wouldn't then necessarily need the full max in order to achieve certainly recommendations 1 and 2.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Morin.
Thank you. So yeah, the proposed in the next recommendation, the proposed 116, that's included in recommendation 3 at this point, correct? So we're voting on it before we've decided what we're going to do about recommendation 4. So I guess it would just, if we didn't do recommendation 4, then that would just automatically reduce. Well, if we vote on 3 and approve it, we wouldn't include the 116.
Correct. So
Okay.
yes, the reason for moving to that maximum recognition would then allow us to build in that recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Director Arber.
Thanks. I guess it's 2014, 2015, 2016, 2015 when the requisition was established, which was based on a prior referendum testing the appetite of the population around a certain level of taxation for the service. It was not well researched. As many of our services that got established, you kind of set a maximum requisition, and that things have changed a lot since 2015. So, you know, the courting councillors and some others are talking about the potential for a housing authority in the valley. We're talking earlier about the need for a housing strategy. When I look at 321 units, I think we always tell ourselves a story, well, it's great, we created the service, then it's 321. There was also, I'd love to know, without the service, how many units would have been created, right? It used to be almost no units were being created in the valley, but partly it's because we had a provincial government that was ignoring the thing for about 30 years. So, but when I look at 321, I think it's an impressive result, because for our contribution, it cost us $4,300 per unit. I did a kind of requisition of about a couple $100,000 a year for the last 7 years. It's actually a great return on investment for us to put $4,000 or so. What I'm leading to here is, you know, if we had a good housing strategy or something else, we've been capping at the max requisition, I think, for the last 4 years. This board has absolutely no problems putting money into what they consider excellent value delivered by the coalition and their partners. So I would be quite thrilled if we had a housing strategy, a little bit more meat on the bone around understanding where we're at. I mean, $14 per household, we're putting to the number one issue recognized in British Columbia. Think about $14 for affordable housing. And now think about our recreation services at, you know, $200 per household. $14, $200. Hockey, soccer, which I love, versus housing. So our requisition is a pittance, right? So I would love staff or our board in strategic planning to have a serious discussion around whether, if we double the requisition, whether that 321 would have been 742, you know? So am I maths right? Maybe not. Anyways, you get my point. So all I'm saying is it's too easy to approve this kind of contribution when we know the problem it is in our communities. Thanks.
And Director Cole-Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. To me, this recommendation is not contingent upon the vote on recommendation number 4. I think everyone around this table has spoken of the crisis of homelessness and the crisis of affordability in this community. I think that Christopher's presentation made it very clear that there's a much larger need out there to kickstart affordable housing than the currently requisitioned amount. As a consequence, I would suggest that we, particularly building on Director Arber's point about the excellent value that's been achieved from this fund, that we move to the maximum requisition regardless of what the outcome is on recommendation 4. This will allow us to do as much as we can with a service which is working with the coalition, which has delivered remarkable results. So I will be voting in favor of recommendation 3, and I think that as I said, that limit going to the max should occur regardless of people's disposition of our recommendation 4. Thanks.
Thank you. And Director McCollum.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess my question centers around, yeah, these additional funds. I'm also in support of maximizing the requisition because there's no question that we can put those funds to good use. If we can debate the best means of addressing that when we get to recommendation 4, but and maybe this question would be better under recommendation 4. It's hard to say, but my question is, this service, we have relied on an excellent model that's been put together under the consensus decision-making from experts in the field, working with a number of different groups. And if we're, as a board, interested in looking at other models or how we put in a structure of a housing service or a different function in which we play a more key role, my question is, does it make sense for us to hold some funding in this service in order to do some of that work, or would it make more sense under the emergency shelter and supportive housing land acquisition service function? Because that was a mouthful. Because I know we did put some funding aside last year for a little bit of study work, and whether or not, if the board is interested in putting some more energy into exploring that, which of these two functions would it fit better under? Sorry, that was very long-winded.
There was a question there.
Yeah.
And I think that the answer is that there's various initiatives potentially being undertaken this year to address this issue. There's the strategic planning session in which we're coming forward with additional information for the board in June to look at an expanded role and see what the board's interest is in that based on what other communities are doing. There also is very preliminary at this time, and certainly something that regional district staff support because of what we hear around the table of the RGS performing some of this work. But that is being vetted through our municipal partners to bring forward recommendations for the RGS service at a later date. But that's another possible opportunity. And I think, Elisa also alluded to the work that's going to be done with respect to this service as well, evaluating its role or otherwise as part of the work plan for this particular service. So I don't think you necessarily need at this time to give us further direction or action. We have various opportunities, and we'll see how those shake out through the financial plan, RGS review, or otherwise as to how they shake out. If you're not satisfied with those, you can give us more specific direction through your strategic planning process in June.
Okay, thanks. I have one subsequent question around, actually, you know what, I'll wait, sorry.
Yeah, I would advise to ask the questions before we get to the next recommendation, if we possibly don't want to move and second it and then vote it down, if I'm reading the room correctly. So if you have questions about the homelessness support service, best to be asked now in recommendation 3 before we move on. Director Boren.
Thank you, Chair. This may be a question for Chris, if it's okay for him to come back up. I'm just curious with the this service is funded, I guess, by everybody except for except for Comox. So if there's a potential affordable housing concept for Comox, does the coalition kind of go to Comox and talk to them about accessing their fund? Because it looked like there was something from Comox in here. I guess I was just curious in terms of process, how that works.
Yeah, there is a separate process. We do a presentation much like this to the town of Comox, and the town of Comox contributes $40,000 and then annually, or has traditionally contributed $40,000 annually. And then as the CVRD does, makes a contract with those agencies, particularly directly, and gives them the money.
Right. So is this Cypress Gardens then? Is that actually funded by Comox? Because it looks like it's under this umbrella.
It's we because of the amount of money that Cypress Gardens asked for, we split it up.
Oh, okay.
Some coming from the CVRD HSS and some coming from the town of Comox.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Director McCollum, go ahead.
Yeah, so to follow up, I guess my question is if we choose not to go with a recommendation 4 and opt for the maximum requisition, the question around what to do with that additional money, whether we use that for, we set it aside and earmark it either for initiating other objectives under the service, or we could simply go back to the coalition and advise them to use their decision-making process to best address the ask from the WACHE development in addition to their other partners. And I'm just curious if there's no, if we do recommendation 3, we need further direction, do we not, on what we're going to do? And does that need to happen tonight, I guess is my question.
So would the money automatically go to the coalition without a further recommendation?
It would be our recommendation if you increase the requisition and don't support the YHA DCC payment to refer the matter to the coalition to come forward with options as to how that money would be spent.
Okay, that makes sense. So can we just do a little amendment to the recommendation with that additional direction, or would it need a separate motion?
You could make a resolution to amend this to refer the extra funds for the recommendation of the coalition.
Okay, I'd like to do that if I have a second.
Okay, so the amendment is to add that we request of the coalition a proposal for the increased funds. And Director Hillian, are you speaking to the amendment?
Yeah, this feels a little awkward. I mean, I think it makes sense that if we increase the requisition, that we do advise the coalition that in fact the requisition has been increased and there's extra funding to for them to determine where it should go. That's our process, and I believe it's appropriate we stick to that process. But it still leaves us with the challenge of whether or not we are going to support WACHE around their request for relief on DCCs. We could in fact leave that to the coalition and see what they decide before we decide, which I guess would mean that we would be deferring recommendation 4 and not voting on it tonight. Yeah, I agree. I don't want to see a recommendation on the floor and have a debate that leads to it being defeated. I think that's the wrong message. And so I think it's important that we understand what our options are prior to bringing that onto the floor.
Madam Chair, if you agree to the amendment and adopt this motion, when it comes to recommendation 4, you could refer that for the consideration of the coalition and get their feedback on that.
And that would still leave us with other potential options.
Correct, because you're seeking the input of the coalition based on, as they describe them, having other requests and that just being one of them.
Thanks.
And Director Cole-Hamilton.
Thanks. I just want to confirm my mental math. It seems to me that no matter what the disposition of recommendation 4, there will be funds in addition, given that the ask in 4 is 116,000 and the increase here is 176,000. So no matter, so Director McCollum's amendment would be relevant no matter what the outcome of recommendation 4. So we're not prejudging anything. We're just ensuring that that any extra funds at the end of the disposition are returned to the coalition for direction. Is that math correct?
That's my understanding. Lisa?
Just to offer some clarity there. So the recommendation for the 250 plus the 40,000 requires an increase in the requisition. So what if you didn't, if you don't approve WACHE, there's still 116 that needs to be decided upon.
Madam Chair, it's because YHA didn't comment on the administrative funding, which is over and above. Is that what you're saying, Lisa? The 40 and the 10 is.
Kevin, do you want to explain this?
That's all right. Through the fair to director. So yeah, where maybe the confusion lies is we already have $30,000 set aside for the coordinator in the proposed budget. We'd be increasing the honorariums from 5 to 10. So that's an increase. What we currently have in the proposed budget is $195,000 set aside for the coalition's requests. We would have to obviously raise that up to that 250 level. That's where if we didn't support WACHE, we wouldn't have 176,000. We'd have to net those additional asks out, which would still leave us $116,000.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I guess my concern here is if we go with, the full amount given to the coalition to decide what they decide, and to come back with proposals. To me, it feels like it's a bit of pressure on them to do what we're hoping. I guess if like pressure to pay the DCCs out of that money, like if we're truly giving that money for them to decide, it kind of, to me, puts a little bit of pressure on the coalition to maybe not look at the whole picture, but I don't know, maybe I'm reading that wrong. Maybe someone can clarify if.
Well, when they showed the funding scenarios, the 3 funding scenarios that they had, it was all proportional increase to all of the 4 projects listed. So that is likely the outcome of an increased funding, I would think.
All right, thanks.
Director Hardy.
Yeah, thanks. I guess just in addition to Director Moran's comments there in regards to putting the coalition into a difficult position, if I'm just again trying to get clarity in regards to a comment that was made earlier with regards to funds being directed towards DCCs was kind of going down a slippery slope. So I'm just wondering again with regards to clarity, if we're referring to the coalition's already put, if I recall correctly from what was stated there at the podium, was that paying for CCCs through the funds that get directed towards the coalition was going down a slippery slope. So can we get some clarity on that? If I understood what was said there in regards to what it is that we're referring to? Because we're kind of referring to the coalition to kind of make that decision with regards to whether or not those dollars can get directed towards the DCCs. So
I think what was said is that, so they did put forward 2 motions from the coalition. One was that we not use the homelessness support tax to pay off DCCs. The other was that they hoped that we would review our own policies around DCCs in a hope that affordable housing projects would qualify for exemption. I think that if we send the extra funds back to the homelessness or back to the coalition, that they could very likely increase the funding to the Wachai project, because there's more room for funding there that wouldn't necessarily apply to DCCs. But they would increase the funds probably to all of those projects on the list. But it wouldn't be directly applied to DCCs. Go ahead, Lisa.
So the coalition, as part of the process, is they describe that it is an EOI process. So they would go back to those expressions that they have received. They would likely not open up to a new EOI process. So it would be the requests that have already been submitted for this year that they would go back and look at. And that may be to the ones that they've already approved.
Right, and all those projects on the lists likely have a much bigger budget than the request that's put forward. So any additional funds, I'm sure, would be welcome. And and would not necessarily apply to any DCCs. So. Okay, I don't see any further lights. We are on an amendment, which was that the extra funds be referred to the coalition for direction. Again, it is the City of Courtenay, Cumberland, and the areas that vote on this. All in favor of the amendment? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. So back to the motion as amended. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we are on item 5, financial plan for the emergency shelter and supportive housing service. Grant and Arbor, thank you. And over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and Alana Mullally is here to present this budget and answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much, Russell. Through Madam Chair to the directors. This service is our function 450. It's the emergency shelter land acquisition service. It was established by bylaw in 2009. Sorry, I was just looking for the clicker. Excuse me. So the service was established by bylaw back in 2009. Thanks, Lisa. The state
Here to present the search and rescue function 265 service. I think before we get started, we're also lucky enough to have Paul Barry here, the president of SAR. It's a Comox Valley Search and Rescue, Ground Search and Rescue, along with Bronwyn Beadle and Paul from the Search and Rescue. I just want to acknowledge their presence and the first responders and the searches and rescues they do in our community is much appreciated. And as such, before I get into my presentation, I'll turn it over to Paul Barry, the president, to give a brief overview of their request, as well as the great service they provide our community.
You just need to press the button on the, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, directors and staff. Appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you tonight about who we are and what we do. On behalf of the men and women of Comox Valley Search and Rescue, we really appreciate this opportunity. I'd like to take some time just to educate you a little bit on search and rescue teams, particularly ours, but also the context here in the province. All search and rescue teams are two-headed monsters. All teams are societies, and all teams have an operational wing. I'm just waiting for my slides to come up, and then we'll continue. We're going to move directly to our ask today. And so that the next slide. There it goes. So we are seeking your long-term support in 4 ways. 1, recognition of Comox Valley Search and Rescue as for first responders in our own right. I'm going to speak to that. We're looking for an increase in our annual operating grant from the present $35,000 to $50,000. We are asking for a without cost land allocation from the regional district to support the building of a permanent home for CVSAR for our future operations. As well, we're asking for a minimum allocation of $500,000 over 5 years to support the construction of a new and permanent SAR facility. There we go. So as I was traveling back and forth on the ferry over the last number of months, I picked up this document and began to read through it. And in this document, it speaks specifically as the Comox Valley as an outdoor utopia. The document is designed to draw others from across this country and beyond to the Comox Valley to live an active lifestyle in the environments that we are so lucky to have. It speaks to hiking in Strathcona Park. It speaks to hiking in the more rural environments in the many regional parks that we have. It speaks to the draw of the ample mountain biking trails that are advertised and draw people from all over the world here to the valley. These are the environments that you probably think about us most. These are the environments where we utilize our highly technical, skilled and trained staff. And these are the environments where you see us portrayed on the news. But there's so much more that we do that you probably don't recognize. When our seniors suffering from dementia wander, we are the team that provides the RCMP the subject matter expertise in lost person behavior to plan and locate these individuals to return them home. When the unhoused and those impacted by addiction die alone, in their remote encampments, we are the team that are asked to go collect those individuals respectfully and with dignity and return them to their families. Most often, this happens when you are at home in bed. These are not events that are advertised, but they are our realities. This is the work that we do more and more often. In addition, as the large-scale natural disasters have impacted our province, it is search and rescue members who are called upon to fulfill roles well outside their traditional training, providing evacuation in the face of wildfires, providing evacuation in the face of substantial flooding in the Fraser Valley, operating again in conditions that most of you would hope never to have to experience. And yet, day in, day out, 365 days a year, it is SAR members and SAR members from Comox Valley Search and Rescue who engage in this work. Our call volumes have increased significantly over the last many years. I'm going to share with you a little bit about our budget so you have some understanding of our realities. Let's see. There we go. So currently, Comox Valley Search and Rescue is the only team on Vancouver Island paying rent for its base of operations. With the location of Comox Valley Emergency Program to this site, we will extend our current rental agreement on Maury Avenue, and that rent will reach an annual cost in excess of $80,000 annually. Like you, and like so many of the things that we do in our own homes, all our costs have increased. Our insurance has increased, our equipment replacement has increased, our fuel costs, our travel, our training. 2022 was the first year that SAR teams around the province were recognized and were allocated annual funding as a line item on the provincial budget. But the funding we receive, and every SAR team receives, is only 50 cents on the dollar. All island teams, with the exception of Comox Valley Search and Rescue, have lands or facilities allocated to them by their regional districts or municipalities at no cost or at minimal cost, most $1 per year. Campbell River Search and Rescue has an owned facility on donated land, and they have a $400,000, well, it will now be $500,000 renovation underway, supported by their municipality. Nanaimo Search and Rescue this past year opened a $2.5 million facility assisted by the city of Nanaimo. They do not hold a mortgage for that facility. Arrowsmith Search and Rescue, Parksville Qualicum area, opened a $2.5 million facility in 2022. They do not have a mortgage on that facility. To give you a little bit more of the provincial context, Ken Harrison, 1.8 million facility opened in 2000. They too do not hold a mortgage on that property. Recently, the Regional District of North Okanagan supported Vernon Search and Rescue with a $3.4 million facility funded through an alternate approval process that will open in the spring of 2023. Earlier last month, the Regional District of Central Okanagan announced funding of $8.4 million for allocation of new SAR facility in their capital plan. Here's some examples. This is the Nanaimo SAR facility opened in 2022. You have the Aerosmith SAR facility that opened last year as well. This is the proposed Vernon Search and Rescue to be opened in the spring, and just a glimpse inside the Kent Harrison SAR facility. Our vision is much more humble. We're looking to be able to build a post-disaster steel structure to be able to house our equipment, to be able to train within, and to be able to support our society. Our work is very much like a small municipal fire department. We have vehicles that have to be maintained in warm facilities, medications that have to be cared for. And so we need a facility where all those functions can be maintained. Currently, we have a quote on this particular building at a quoted price of 1.5 million. I suspect it will be higher. We are a very frugal team. We have put aside $500,000 into GICs over the last couple of years. Most of that $500,000 has come at the sacrifice of training, of replacement equipment. We have met with our local MLA. We have talked with gaming. We have attempted to apply for the $250,000 capital gaming grant. And because of land values here in the Comox Valley, because of building costs, we are not eligible for that $250,000. Fundraising. We've been engaged in fundraising now for quite a number of years to be able to set aside that $500,000. But that fundraising is negatively impacting our training, replacement equipment, and modernization. And ultimately, it is impacting our team morale. We have always been leaders in SAR in BC, but we are now falling behind due to the significant financial constraints that we're facing because we are rent poor. And we are the only first responders in the Comox Valley who are sorting cans and bottles at the landfill to make ends meet. So I come back to our ask. And I must say that we do very much appreciate the support that we have had from the regional district, from the staff, as we've been working through these realities over the last number of years. This has been a long-term goal for us. I'm not going to read these again, but I want to thank you for the time and opportunity to speak to you. And we're here for questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. It's quite an impactful presentation. I do have one question, starting with Director Arbour.
Thanks, Chair. I can't think of another one. I think this is the best pitch I've heard in 5 years in terms of airtight, the need, the comparison to other support in other municipalities, the public value of the effort. If everything checks out, I think we have to step up to the plate as a region and help provide a space for search and rescue. I'll tell my story now. I was going to save it for later, but since you're all here, we were in Ottawa last week. We were with Minister of Rural Development, and I don't know what our folks here put in her drinks between Dr. Grieve and Chair Kettler and Russell and Howard, but they were talking broadly about emergency response, about all these elements, searching everything around the valley of what they heard. And apparently now she's telling cabinet at the federal level and all the municipalities around the country that we probably have the best of the best in the Comox Valley and how we're organized around all these things. But clearly there's a gap in regards to that building. And I don't know, the direction to staff would be to try to figure out a path to support this, the 500,000 request. I know we're about to land collectively quite a bit of money from the province before the end of March. And I know that each of our jurisdictions, the EAs and the municipality will each be looking at their projects internally, but perhaps this would be our one regional thing that we can collaborate on if it's eligible. I don't know. I think it'd be nice to try to find a way to meet the requests, and I think from a public perspective, I'm sure there'll be a lot of support for it. Every life saved by search and rescue, I mean, what's the value of that in the valley? And you do that pretty often, so that kind of investment is minimal compared to what we receive. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Kerr.
Thank you. So as I understand it, one of the asks is 100,000 for each of the next 5 years, making $500,000 to support construction of a new facility. Just without a site and a plan, how would this work? Maybe this is a question for staff. Would these funds be held in reserve by the CVRD until a site and project is identified? And perhaps a secondary question, what if it didn't go forward? Then what would happen to these funds? Thanks.
Thank you through the chair. The intention is to hold them in a reserve. We'll get into the budget a little later, but I will note that for $6.48 on 800,000, we've already included this ask in the budget. So we already feel it's appropriate funding to move forward with the 150,000 that they requested over the next 5 years. But yes, in the event that they were unable to build a building, this budget does look at a number of other avenues and vehicles that that help with search and rescue throughout the valley. And some of those vehicles will be coming up to replacement as well. So I think we will be able to use the reserve funds regardless. And I'm sure SAR will also have operational needs in the future if they're unable to meet these commitments. So I think putting aside $100,000 a year will be a benefit to all these vehicles and CV SAR as well.
Thank you. Director Grant.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you guys do great work. I actually play hockey with some of the guys that you work with, and they're constantly after me for a piece of land. So you're you're not the only voice out there. But I'm just wondering, what would the optimal spot for a facility be for you, and how big a piece of land do you need?
We would certainly need a couple of acres. We have been looking at a number of different sites. We certainly our most desirable site would be on Grant Road, adjacent to the current visitor center, which is regional district property. We did have a number of private landowners come forward recently with the potential donation of land, which is out towards the landfill. That us out much further than we would like to be in terms of our response times. If the reality is that for swiftwater rescue and things like that, where time is of the urgency, we need to be centralized so that our members can respond to our building and then respond to that emergency.
Okay, and can we get the province or the federal government to step up a little bit? You know, we're looking at some pretty big tax increases this year. You know, by the time you put everything in play here, it's 11% plus water and sewer gets to 18% for our community. And then we've got our own taxes to add on top of that. So this is a really big ask, but it's an important ask. So I think that we would need help from senior levels of government. You know, and if we could find someone to donate the land, or we could get you a piece of land. How did those discussions go with senior government, or have you had any yet?
We've had a number of conversations, both at the provincial level, not at the federal, because search and rescue is a provincial responsibility. Most of that conversation has been around the capital grants that are available, and all of the answers we've received, both from government and from gaming, is that we're not eligible.
Okay, next we have Director Hardy.
Yeah, thanks. You had me at hello. Thank you again for all the hard work that you and your team do for the Comox Valley and for the rest of British Columbians and Canadians. I know just last week we heard an announcement by the province in regards to $1 billion being directed towards infrastructure. And Russell, I'm just wondering again, with regards to those funds, if there's a means for us in regards to finding this a square peg to get through a round circle with regards to helping these guys, if that's something that we might be able to do with those newly announced funds. Thanks.
Madam Chair, yes, it is very new, the availability of these funds. Certainly the reference has been that emergency services will qualify, but the devil's in the detail. We don't have the particulars as of yet, but initial look is quite promising that projects such as this might apply to those funds, but we'll let you know as we gain more information as to what will qualify.
Thank you. Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Paul, for the presentation. And I would certainly encourage all directors to go and look at your current facility, as I had the opportunity last year, and see what you're working with. One time you were looking at potentially buying that building, but you've come to the determination that that's not going to meet your needs long term.
Certainly the building has served us well, but it's not suitable going forward. It's going to need a significant amount of work, and the current landlord is now asking well in excess of $2 million.
Mm-hmm. And I think we've got a staff recommendation that addresses items 2 and 4 of your ask. I'm wondering what we can do to recognize you as first responders, and then I'll have a further question for staff.
I think it's more of mindset. We are unpaid and we're not asking for pay. It's the profile. It's the having gone through the pandemic when other first responders, police, fire, ambulance, received accolades, had signs thanking them. And yet during that time, it was SAR volunteers across the province and in this community too that had the highest call volumes that we ever had. And yet we were scrimping and saving and digging. And if it weren't for the support of the emergency program here for things like masks and gloves and things like that, we had to find them on our own because we're not recognized.
Well, that's certainly overdue, that recognition, and it's somewhat ironic. The brochure you held up encouraging people to come here. The irony is that of all those people, some of them get lost and require you folks to find them. And it's your expertise from knowing our mountains and our trails that enables you to do that. So it's a bit of a circular economy there in a strange way. Final question for staff. I know that there was some discussion at one point of whether or not the water treatment plant would be a potential co-location for this service. I know there's been some discussion about whether there's possibilities to work with the Courtenay Fire Department and that sort of thing, but did staff consider whether we have any access to land or any facility to that could potentially help in this regard?
Through the chair, we've been working with SAR over the last couple of years, identifying lands of possibilities. I think this ask is really about putting that financial piece in whichever lands that they are able to secure, either with or without our help as we move forward in this process. It's really about, as Paul alluded to a little earlier, about being in that response circle where it's adequate. I'm sure they want to, be closer to the municipalities where a lot of their members live, and water treatment plant is a potential site, but it is quite a ways out and does have some access issues in times of need or other times of getting people out there in major earthquakes or snow events, etc. So that's not off the table, but I think, it's important that we look at other sites before it becomes a last kind of resort effort.
Thanks very much.
Okay, I don't see any further questions, and we are on receipt. All in favor? Any opposed to receipt? That's carried unanimously. And there's recommendations. Moved by Arbor, seconded by Grant, and that's that the operating financial plan for search and rescue function be approved. Any further discussion? Let's vote with full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Moved by Hillian, seconded by Moran. That future expenditure reserve be established with contributions of $100,000 per year for the next 5 years for the purpose of land purchase and or facility construction. Any further discussion? Oh, am I on the wrong? Okay, go ahead.
Just to recognize what Dr. Hardy and myself were talking about, would staff like, or alternatively that we explore the potential of the grant funding coming our way to fulfill this ask?
At this time, my recommendation is to proceed with the recommendations before you. We hear you that you would like to consider that grant program or that funding opportunity, and as the details come forward, we can come back and advise you as to whether this applies or not. But I think, the creation of the reserve, the allocation of the monies, the adoption of the budget, and are important steps regardless. And it gives them some certainty that we are moving forward in the event that that program doesn't apply.
Thanks. You're correct. So I won't argue it, but even Dr. Grant, like if there's a way to fund this without even the province, knowing right away, but it saves us the advocacy. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we're on recommendation 2. It's been first and seconded, and it's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And you are very much valued and appreciated if that wasn't apparent by this board. So just as staff, is it good to take a break now, or is there? Okay, great. So we will take a break. Let's take 10. So we'll come back at 6:45. Okay, if we can have everybody back to the table. We left off at item 7, which is the Comox Valley Emergency Program, Function 270. Moved by Cole Hamilton, seconded by Kerr.
Thank you, Chair and Directors, and Howie Siemens is here to present this report and answer your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to directors. Thank you for having me back. I'm just going to wait for. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay, I thought there was. Okay, yeah. Okay, I was. Okay, there it is. So, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm here today or tonight to provide you my financial plan for Function 270, which is the emergency program. So for 2023, the emergency program has incorporated Function 271 back into 270, which was the original structure of it back in 2019 when we established that service and decided to support electoral areas with some more administrative costs. Worked. So the service supports electoral areas A, B, and C, the town of Comox, city of Courtenay, village of Cumberland, and works very closely with the Comox First Nation. It is delivered under one service establishment bylaw, emergency program bylaw number 1341, that includes the direct participants electoral areas only. The 3 municipalities are supported through a 5-year service agreement that have been extended until December of this year. CVEP continues to build strong relationships of trust through continued collaboration with the Comox First Nations, all emergency program partners, as we all work together to advance plan to address and respond to emergency and disaster events for the Comox Valley and within BC, where we sometimes are deployed to support other local governments. For 2023, delivery of the program estimated residential tax rate and tax impacts for a household is estimated at $800,000. It's proposed to be $14.56. To provide you some of our 2022 work accomplishments, some of the highlights that we were achieved saw a major increase in advanced planning and addressing responses this year. Our records show in the past we might see 1 or 2 events that need some advanced planning or response focus. But in 2022, there were many extreme weather events, such as cold weather, several heat waves that increased risk to undersheltered and unhoused populations and community members, and increased atmospheric rivers that raised our flood risk and potentials of mudslides in some of our areas in the Comox Valley. In addition to these responses, our emergency support services level 1 volunteers who go out and do a lot of the support to evacuees after fire responded to 7 house fires, which is above their normal, which is usually 2 or 3, and supported 15 evacuees. We also finished off the successful delivery of the fracture on 5th, the full-scale exercise that we commented on before. CVEP was also successful in receiving community emergency preparedness funding for emergency support services and emergency operations center initiatives. Due to the extreme busy response year into 2022, we've had to carry over some of this work into 2023. The primary source of revenue for emergency management program is through the TAC requisition, which is proposed to be $227,173 in 2023, at a decrease of $38,337 from the 2000 levels. It's your supper that's distracting me. Sorry, I can smell the food. Sorry. From 2000 levels of 265,510, made up of the combination tax requisition for both providing services from Function 270 and 271. Courtenay and Cumberland and Comox presently continue to contribute and benefit from their services by the fee of service contract delivery. This revenue is slated to increase by $128,978 in 2023 from the $201,490 in 2022, as reflective of the move to providing full regional program delivery costs and combined delivery initiatives that were duplicated in both functions such as training, public education, advertising and marketing, regional asset management, and repairs to buildings and facilities. The 2023 operation grant or fund decreased from 2022 budget is mainly due to the fracture on Fifth exercise, and you saw the cost of that in the previous report being completed. Many of the minor capital items also being purchased for the regional EOC are almost done. We're 99% there, but we did see an increase of those costs in 2022. And supporting the request from the CEOs, our CVAP Administrative Committee, to keep the requisition stable for a few years so they can ready the community for any tax increases. Other revenues and recoveries costs are from several CVRD departments for the collective use and marketing of Connect Rocket Community, our mass notification system used for stage 1 to stage 4 water restrictions and other known hazard notifications that as we required. As each department's emergency response plans also indicate. Also, CVAP's sublease agreement costs with Comox Valley Search and Rescue for CVAP that's use of 3001 Maury Avenue will end August 31st, 2023. So our numbers have been showing that we will not continue in our budget after that point, though we might provide some internet service for some of the equipment that we're leaving behind for storage. Expenditures, personnel costs will increase due to CVAP proposing 1 full-time position to better assist emergency support services, emergency radio communications teams with addressing their recruitment campaign needs, developing training plans, exercise delivery, and building a calendar so that they all be coordinated together, and using electronic tools to enhance their ability to support all Comox Valley local governments and Comox First Nations, as well as to be able to be deployed remotely to support provincial events. These public safety lifeline volunteers, along with Comox Valley Search and Rescue, perform emergency response tasks and duties and on benefit of the local governments in the Comox Valley, such as planning and operations of reception centers for evacuees, being the last mile of communications when all telecommunications fail, and providing door-to-door evacuation notifications that when we require them and we task them out. Overall operating costs for the service are projected to decrease in 2023 by $172,789. Part of the decrease is contributed to reflecting a full regional program delivery cost under Function 270, and that combines delivery initiatives that were duplicated again under the old Function 271, such as training, public education, resource asset management, and resources and reserve contributions. So our 2023 work plan priorities, we will always focus on response readiness and responses. So always looking at advanced planning and in preparing for regional service responses. Part of that is also ensuring that we are ready to host other communities as they've approached us to be their host community if they have to evacuate. We are focused on the Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Program, which is going really well at this point, as well as our Fire Smart initiatives, which we are continuing doing grants for to further enhance that and provide more resources and staffing opportunities. We are also doing UBCM grants. So again, we've made applications to the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund through the ESS and Emergency Operations Center streams. We are about to submit, and it was before the board earlier, Community Resilient Investment grant application that we are doing regionally with the part of 5 other partners, including the Comox First Nation. And we are supporting the Indigenous Culture Safety and Culture Humidity Regional Grant, which is with the Comox First Nation. And we are collaborating with them and supporting them in trying to ensure a regional approach to the application as well. Regional delivery of the emergency management continues to collaborate on a capacity building and strong relationship building based on trust. I spoke this earlier, is that we're looking for 1 full-time staff person right now. We have a term position in there that is taking on a lot of the work. We are still fleshing out some of the unknown work that or the known work and our non-ability to actually deliver. So, and why we're asking for this position is that the work has become more complex. We are now looking at climate readiness as well as looking at increases in delivering responses and getting our volunteer programs ready and able to be able to support our community, because with 3 staff, without these volunteers like search and rescue and our ESS and our radio people, we would not be able to function, even if we, as we saw in the exercise, with us, most of us in the EOC, there's very little resources that do that on the ground except our volunteers. And increasing the need to address the Sendai framework, which is the structure that the province has adopted, which is the 4 pillars of emergency management, and also looking at the DRIPA lens to increase or to include that in our emergency management, which has never been done even at a provincial level. The greater complexities to supporting community recovery, another piece of the 4 pillars that has not been focused at very well, as we saw through the Fraser Valley and the Merritt events that just happened. They're long into and will continue to be in recovery processes, and there need to be staff there to be able to support those initiatives. And then expanding the service to hopefully to move it to actually a true regional program. So just to highlight a couple of our key successes, the neighborhood emergency preparedness program, the Fire Smart program are 2 very important initiatives to the CVAP. These programs are designed with easy approaches that will support neighborhoods and communities to become better prepared for an emergency or disaster, assisting them to learn how to mitigate or prevent risk with their neighbors as a team will create a self-sufficiency and more resilience for several days or weeks. Their teamwork of support will provide support to first responders and the emergency program so they can focus on priorities addressing immediate life threat and safety and essential services to their tasks. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present my 270 budget, and be happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you for the presentation, Howie. Just let people finish their dinners a bit to see if there's any questions. Director Arbor.
Yeah, just because I told Dr. Grant I wouldn't talk again, because my brain cells are starting to be affected, I'll talk. See what happens. But in terms of emergency response, you kind of get marked by your first exposure, and I've never been anywhere close to emergency response. And in COVID, I mean, to watch the team and their level of response to that kind of emergency and how you were connecting with people on the ground in my communities, with nonprofits, with different groups. And what I remember from that is that part of the program, your greatest strength is that I think you instill confidence that we will get through it. You know, I think that you had that calm manner for all the staff involved. And yeah, I really like some of the ambitions. My question, if you can expand a little bit, I don't know what the Sendria framework is and how DRIPA would be incorporated into emergency. So I know you briefly touched on it, but that's the one part I didn't understand what was behind that.
Through Madam Chair, yeah, so the Sendai framework is really about the prevention, mitigation, response, preparedness, and recovery. But it is the Sendai piece of it is making it to an all society approach. So that includes everybody, all of government. So all in government will be a part of that. But the main lens is on disaster, really reduction is what we're looking at in that model. And in the Sendai, the guidance is to look at all four pillars equally, not just into the response as we've mostly done through my life in emergency management, and leave the recovery piece to, we'll figure it out at the end. Is the, again, looking, yeah, so basically what we're looking for that is just ensuring the engagement of First Nations communities in part of that emergency management structure. Something that we already do well here is really working closely with our First Nations community and that engagement piece, but also seeing it from their cultural and heritage background of what we can do better and to address and maybe mitigate some of the things that we've been having to do based on climate change. So there's a history that there we need to acknowledge more when it comes to disasters and events that have happened in the past.
Thank you. Director Morin, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Chair. My questions are regarding the neighborhood program. My recollection is that it was going to be sort of initiated by neighborhoods. That I know I think I brought up the potential of outreach to go into neighborhoods to kind of rally them or mobilize them a bit, but I just wondered where that was sitting. Our neighborhoods voluntarily kind of signing up for that. And then the other question is, with that program, is there the ability to kind of measure outcomes? And I'm thinking about some of the things that we've seen throughout COVID in terms of isolation, food security issues, to see if there's any kind of spin-offs from that program that we can kind of capture the benefits of, because I know that was the hope of through some of the conversations that we had around food security and other things. We were hoping that maybe that neighborhood program could help, help with that.
Through the chair. Yeah, so the first question, basically the neighborhood program, what we have done, and I have to sort of acknowledge my team is Carrie McIntyre, our emergency planning coordinator, has really been a strong lead in this initiative. So we have a kind of a multi approach to how we're doing it. So we went and approached past neighborhood teams and kind of engaged them to get a feel of what they want to do with the program. We use them as a catalyst or champion to go to the next door community or next road over, depends on what the community looks like, to be able to do that. But we're also getting back to doing community outreach. So going out to markets and fairs and events to be able to be more proactive in advertising. But what I also find is because we have Fire Smart, the fire chiefs or fire departments have been really a lot to connecting us to those communities that may be interested in hosting a community event or a cul-de-sac event. And so we're working in sort of with synergies on that piece. The second part to your question, we are trying to get the program up and running. And as we do that, some of those initiatives, we are trying to see how we can fit them in. But this program right now is just getting communities to feel comfortable that they are a big part of the success by just meeting each other and working to each other to support each other.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any further questions. So thanks again, Howie. We're on receipt. All in favor of receipt? Any opposed? That's carried. Moved by Arbor, seconded by Hillian. The recommendation is that the proposed 23 to 2027 operating financial plan, capital plan for the Comox Valley Emergency Program be approved. Any further discussion? Okay, it's a vote of the areas only. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And we're on to item 8, which is 2023-2027 financial plan for member municipality administration service. Moved by Hillian, seconded by Grieve. And over to staff.
Thank you, Chair, and Kevin DeBell will present this and the next two budgets after it.
Thank you very much, Russell, through the chair to the director. So yes, I'll be presenting the next three budgets, starting with member municipality administration, and certainly welcome any. Here, 30% of our chief administrative officer's time, along with 30% of the executive assistant's time, is allocated to this service. For the benefit of others, 60% is then allocated to the electoral area administration service, with the remaining 10% picked up by our solid waste service. There are some other staff allocations that are supporting the work of the member municipal directors here as well. 30% of our deputy chief financial officers or deputy chief administrative officers time is allocated here, along with 30% of our manager of legislative services. And a new allocation that has been placed in the service this year is the senior manager of strategic initiatives. As you may recall, this position is really to provide key leadership on projects and program delivery that have substantive impacts and benefits with public organizations, Indigenous peoples, senior government, and municipal partners. And this position is also allocated 40% to our electoral areas administration service and 20% to the Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District. There we go. So to give you a sense of kind of the year-over-year comparative budget, this table shows you kind of the comparison between 2022 adopted budget and our 23 proposed. Right now, requisition increase from 2022 of $75,000 is due in large part to some increases in governance costs. So that would be about $31,000 in director's remuneration and other personnel costs, inclusive of that senior manager of strategic initiatives I just spoke to. Operating costs are actually down from the prior year, and that's due to an equivalent reduction in this particular service to the support service allocation. Currently, there are no reserve contributions earmarked in this service for 2022, given that the reserve is fairly healthy for this type of service, although we have not yet kind of finalized any prior year surplus carry forwards. And just to give you a sense of the overall budget increase, the overall proposed budget increase is about $61,000 from 2022. That represents about a 9.7% increase. And then for the benefits of the three member municipality jurisdictions that pay into the service, this just provides you a snapshot of the year-over-year change based on that requisition increase of $75,000. So as you can see there, Comox's allocation would be up about $18,000, Courtney about $47,500, and Cumberland at $8,700. And that's all I have for this particular service. Certainly welcome any questions.
Thank you, Kevin. Are any questions on this member municipality service? Okay, I don't see any. We're on receipt. All in favor of receipt? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. And there's a recommendation. Moved by Cole Hamilton, seconded by Grant, and that's that we approve the financial plan for this service. Any further discussion? It's member, all members of the board, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to the financial plan administration and general government services. Moved by Arbor, seconded by Moran. And over to staff.
Thank you once again through the chair to the directors. So yes, in front of you now is a brief presentation on our administration and general government service, function 110 for 2023-2027. There's also a number of members of our corporate administrative team in the room as well to provide any support for any questions that you may have. So this slide kind of provides you a bit of a breakout of how this service is structured. And of course, this is broken down into its various corporate function components. So for example, this service provides that general corporate management. It also provides legislative services, finance and procurement, human resources, information systems, communications and public engagement, fiscal services and capital, and then lastly, our corporate office building here at Hermston. The next couple of slides will just speak to some of the primary funding sources in this service. So really one of our primary sources here is the support service cost allocation policy. So that board approved policy was adopted back in 2012 as a best practice method. So it was done after some extensive financial analysis working with a consultant to really do a kind of a scan both across regional districts as well as across regional type governments across the country to really look at how each organization was kind of funding their corporate administration, and this was really seen at that time as really a best practice in that regard. The main source of revenue again is that recovery from the frontline services, and as we've outlined there is an increase in being proposed this year in part to support some capacity building within general administration. Several of the other presentations have spoken to the increased or greater complexity in the work that we're seeing, the increased regulations that are kind of driving that, and certainly the increased volume of work. So that support service allocation is due to increase by about 1.5 million. That's also being driven partly by the fact that we have less prior year surplus carry forward available to offset that support service cost. Another component, we do have some recoveries from outside entities or related entities. So of course, we have an administration charge of $132,600 that's charged out to our North Island 911 Corporation. And then we do have an administrative levy of $200,000 that we recover from our regional hospital district. Looking at some other funding sources that are included within this budget. So currently we have a single longstanding tax requisition of $175,000, and that the impetus of that requisition was really to support contributions to the reserve for our corporate office space for any future asset management or asset renewal and replacement that may be required. In addition to that, we have an $80,000 special requisition kind of outlined in the proposed financial plan to support proposed community agencies and social initiatives that have been spoken to at this table previously. There's also a number of other revenues, such as grants that can come through this service from time to time, grants in lieu, certainly investment income from our financial assets, and I've mentioned prior year surpluses already. Surplus funds, as I noted on the previous slide, are often used to offset the general support services charge out amount or cost allocation amount. But as these surpluses are used up, obviously that will require more administrative costs to be borne by that recovery. General administration is also where programs that don't fit into a service are provided through administration. And that can include such items as our Comox Valley Community Health Network funding. That, of course, is funded through Island Health. So that grant comes into the service and then we provide the expenditures out through our management services function within here. We also continue to carry forward the Community Works Fund contribution approved a couple of years ago to the Hornby Island Arts Center. So that's been again carried forward from 2022. We also have $15,000 allocated in this financial plan for the development of a required accessibility plan in accordance with new legislative requirements that have come forward recently. And lastly, we have $130,000 to support ongoing programs and works with Comox First Nation and also in support of Indigenous relations generally. So take a look at the overall budget, starting with the revenues. I'll just be providing some highlights that I've already kind of spoken to on the 2 slides. Senior government grants, again, includes our basic regional district grant of about 160,000. That also includes the allocation of community works funds for the Harmony Island Arts Center, and also includes the dollars to support the health network. Other recoveries include contributions from other services, particularly this year with the creation of the new internal cost of carbon policy and the internal cost of carbon reserve. So we are collecting all of those allocations from the various service into this particular service, and then we will be establishing a reserve where those dollars will sit until such time as we determine how best to use those to help support GHG emission reduction projects. Moving on to the expenditure side. So we've broken this down into the various kind of corporate functions or components. So I can certainly provide some highlights on each. So overall, there is a reduction in the admin and general government operating budget of $248,000 or approximately 4%. Management services, as I mentioned previously, that includes the cost of the CAO office. That, of course, doesn't include the CAO and executive assistant personnel costs that are included in the member municipality admin and electoral area admin services that I mentioned previously. There's also within management services an allocation of $95,000 in conditional grants to agencies such as the Comox Valley Social Planning Society, for the Accessibility Committee, the Lush Valley Food Action Society for the Food Policy Council, and the Comox Valley Community Health Network for the substance use strategy. We do have a small amount of personnel costs, as you can see there, $30,230 to support the new senior manager of strategic initiatives. Although, as I stated earlier, we will be recovering those from the Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District. With respect to corporate administration or legislative services, personnel costs are up 13.9% in 2020 from 2022, due in part to a 0.43 FTE increase in branch assistant positions. That branch assistant position was previously allocated in addition to this area to other services throughout the organization. We've brought that fully back into general administration, and then of course that then gets charged out through support service. And then generally operating costs within legislative services are up fairly modestly from 2022. Within financial services, our overall operating budget has decreased slightly from 2022. Although within personnel costs, we do have 2.4 FTE increase resulting from 2 new positions that I'll be speaking to in a subsequent slide when I review the overall new position requests that are contained within the admin and general government report. It's important to note that within the cost increases for personnel noted in 113, there was initially an allocation for an asset management coordinator. That asset management coordinator position is going to be deferred until 2024. So we'll be bringing that request back at that time. Looking at human resources, the operating budget has increased by about $103,000 over 2022. And that's primarily due to some increases in other professional fees, most notably to provide some corporate-wide training initiatives, such as leadership training, workplace and respect or code training, and also Indigenous relations training. There's also a modest increase of $15,000 in public relations costs, and then there's some other items as we've outlined in the staff report. Personnel costs for human resources are up about $118,000, and that does include a new payroll and HRIS coordinator position that, again, I'll be speaking to in a subsequent slide. Moving into information services. Information services manages in excess of 181 PCs and laptops, 70 plus smart devices between smartphones and iPads, 75 servers, and about 30 plus SCADA related systems throughout the CVRD. Within this service, we have an increase in personnel costs resulting from a 0.75 FTE impact in 2023 for a new position, IT business analyst position that I'll be speaking to momentarily. Otherwise, increases in operating costs within this function are due in large part to additional software and licensing cost increases of about $44,000. And that can include corporate software licenses for new staff and increases in our Microsoft upgrade costs. There is also a transfer to other functions within this particular subfunction with respect to corporate network and phone connectivity, and that's related to our fiber optic projects. Looking at communications, personnel costs here, there's a further 0.68 FTE now reflected in general administration that was previously charged out charged out via support services in an increase to create fairness and transparency across the organization. So again, this was a position that had changed from 2022. We've brought back all of our communication staff into general admin to provide that more fulsome transparency and fairness. And then again, those costs get borne out through the support service allocation. Other modest increases in the operating budget rather in communications relate to a number of items again that we've outlined in the staff report. Briefly on fiscal services and capital, this is really a sub-function that really drives a lot of our contributions to reserves and our contributions in relation to planned capital projects. So the majority of the capital expenditures that are being supported through this particular function are on an ongoing basis and consist of various IT infrastructure projects such as fiber optic infrastructure, firewalls, software needs, server upgrades, and of course, equipment upgrades. And then lastly, corporate office. Personnel costs here are due to increase by 0.375 FTEs in 2023 due to the addition of a new climate resiliency coordinator that I'll be speaking on the next slide. And then operating costs within corporate office are up modestly in 2023, again, to a number of items. So with respect to the new positions that are being proposed in this service, I've just provided you a snapshot here. This is also included in the staff report for your information. I'll just kind of touch on each of them briefly. So within financial services, the two big drivers here are a new financial accountant position. And this is really needed to build redundancy for critical regulated external reporting needs, as well as to build capacity for much needed technological advances within the branch. The financial planning analyst is really necessary to build capacity within the financial planning team to ensure financial standards can continue to be met, to conduct deeper analysis, and to support the energy and emission goals. As well, the added capacity will allow the progression of implementing fiscal sustainability. And just to put it in context, historically, the financial planning team has really kind of been built on 1.5 FTEs. And just given that increased complexity and volume of work, this is seen as really something that's now needed. With respect to the payroll and human resources or HRIS coordinator, this position will provide some critical backup and support to our manager of payroll and benefits, and really complement the HR team to assist with maximizing employee efficiencies. The current structure does not include any dedicated backup or succession planning for the payroll and benefits manager, despite the growth in employees due to improvements in district, due to things like improvement district conversions, regulatory changes, and of course, program expansions. With respect to an IT business analyst within our IT service or function, working with the business application software specialist, this position will support corporate-wide implementation and ongoing maintenance of CBRD's geospatial-based asset management program. In addition, this position will also contribute to business process enhancement projects and the creation of business intelligence and visualization tools to support data-driven solutions and decision-making across the organization. And then lastly, the climate resiliency coordinator. This new position will support implementation of the corporate energy and emissions plan and related projects to reduce GHG emissions across the organization. And that's all I have for this particular budget. We will be reaching out and scheduling time as we do every year with our municipal financial officers to review those budgets that the member municipalities pay directly into, and we'll be providing them any detail they require with respect to those budgets. But I'll certainly leave it there and welcome any questions.
Great, thank you, Kevin. And I would ask the board to, before we move off receipt, to consider the next recommendation. They'll need to list the organizations that will be contributing to from this function. And if they have any questions about that, now is a good time to ask. They've only listed the Comox Valley Social Planning Society in the recommendation at 20,000, but within the report, there is also the Community Health Network, Substance Use Strategy, and Lush Valley Food Policy Council. Director Morin.
No, I was just curious why they were all in the report, but in the recommendation, there was just the one listed. But I'm assuming we can just add in those other two.
That's correct.
Okay. And Director McCollum.
Actually, I've answered my own question by going back. I thought that the ask from the Food Policy Council was 15,000, but I think they list off another 5,000 that I missed when I skimmed the letter. So I've answered my own question, but it is the amount listed with Lush and the Food Policy Council higher up in the report is the same request that the letter at the end of the staff report is related to. That's not an additional request. That's the same one.
Correct.
That correct?
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so I don't see any further lights. We're on receipts. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And there's a recommendation. Director Morin.
Well, I'll move the recommendation and include the 25,000 for the substance use strategy with the Comox Valley Health Network and the 20,000 for the Food Policy Council.
Second.
Seconded by Hillian. Any further discussion? Director Arbor.
Thanks, Chair. I don't like it. I don't like that we're kind of doing that on the spot, because I could say, well, maybe the young agrarian should go in there. So I'm not going to block it this year, but it's an odd way to operate for us to just, have one agency listed without a rationale with a grant, and two that sit in the report without a recommendation from staff, and all the other agencies that don't even know that they can access these funds. It doesn't feel right at all to me. So I think I don't recall us kind of operating like that in prior years. Maybe we did, maybe I missed it, but I just don't like it at all. Yeah. So so maybe my recommendation, if the board's going to vote for this, is that in the future we don't do this, that next year we come up with a better plan for the allocation of that amount, and with a better staff rationale. And if it's part, like I'm looking at all the efforts we're putting into our rural grant program for much smaller amounts of money, the hoops we make people jump through, and this is just like, okay, well, this to me feels like an old-fashioned slush fund, and I don't like it. Thanks.
Madam Chair, the history on these particular proposals was that they came forward with political representation, and members of the board brought these forward for the consideration of the board, and it was post-pandemic, or we were feeling the onslaught of it, and the rationale was made by the board at the time that these were organizations that needed help and support. I think in terms of the Social Planning Society, they had expectations that there would be other means or ways of us to support. Staff presented to you, the board, as a political decision that we could do this on a one-time basis. These organizations have expected help and support and have come forward again. It is for this reason that staff are presenting to you the option of establishing a regional granting service so that you have the mechanism to do this on a regular basis. So the criteria is established, it is transparent or otherwise. So please consider that when the letters come from the chair to the various representatives of the rationale for establishing that. Because I think, hearing your concerns, I support that. Other organizations don't know this. They've come forward to make this request. It's been supported in the past. It's not ideal, but these organizations are counting on you. The one exception this year is the Social Planning Society. And because of recent legislation requiring us to establish a committee and work with a group like this, they fit the bill for that. So there is a rationale for that. And Kevin mentioned that will be an ongoing association that we will have, or an expense within this budget.
Thank you. Director Morin, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Russell kind of outlined it. I mean, it is in the report, and it does say that in future would be best considered in future years through a separate social development grant service. So I don't see this as necessarily keeping rolling over, but we're not at that point yet. And these organizations, everyone is worthy, but these are a couple organizations in particular that have really, I think, weathered a lot of the COVID and post-COVID strains that we've been under. And, hopefully as we move forward, we'll be able to look at a more appropriate way to fund, but I think it outlines in the report that it's not necessarily a year-to-year arrangement. Thanks.
Thank you. And I don't see any further lights. So we did have a mover and seconder, and the 3 organizations were put forward. Director Grave.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that the 39 other agencies, they're trying to get money under function 451. And, I think I said something at the Social Planning Society one time about, that if you're looking for big money, you're knocking on the wrong door, that we can give you tens of thousands of dollars. And that's sort of where it's at. It's very small, in the bigger picture of things. So I do think that, we have to wrap our heads around the fact that the need is never going to go away. And there are so many worthy societies and nonprofits and organizations out there that have, maybe less acumen on how to apply for these grants. And to put it under this service is an anomaly, I think. We already talked about it's like putting things under the regional growth strategy because we don't have any other place to put it. So, we're going to have to wrap our heads around what we can fund, what we can't fund. Obviously, most of these organizations are able to leverage a lot of money from the money we give them. But yeah, it's I think Director Grant was talking about things are quickly becoming a pit, and there is no end to it. So we have to firm up a little bit, but I guess we're too late in the budget cycle right now. So
Thanks. Just to confirm that it was seconded by Director Hillian. Yes. Director Morin.
Just one last comment. I just wanted to point out the substance use strategy in particular. I think many of us in the city of Courtenay have really appreciated having some more regional contribution as we've been funding it for 20 plus years, and it's actually gone. It's become a lot more comprehensive in terms of developing a strategy. I would say that it's the most pressing social issue, obviously, other than housing, that we're seeing. And just as a real downer piece of information to report, apparently we had 2 more deaths due to the toxic drug crisis this week, which is 7 in the last, I think, about a couple weeks in this community. That's a huge number of people in a community of this size. So I think the substance use strategy in particular. This is hopefully helping that committee, which is made up of people around the table and many others, to really try to make a difference in terms of that toxic drug crisis. Thanks. Dr. Harbour.
Yeah, thanks. I feel I have to respond because I don't want to go in the books as somebody who is against those initiatives. I'm against the process and framework that we have. And maybe that's what it highlights this time. In fact, we just had a discussion at ESC around the concept of regional grant or social services, and it wasn't clear to us, I think, as a group. But definitely what's clear to me is it sounds like the organization has put the flexibility to try to open up an envelope, but I do agree with them as well that for this to live in admin will raise more questions for the public as to what the criteria is and all the rest of it. So I guess we should have good discussions and pick this up in the context of the our individual responses to the chair's letter from a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, thank you for that discussion. Don't see any further lights, and the motion is on the screen. And it is a vote of the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And we are on to financial plan for the 9/11 answering service. Moved by Hillian, seconded by Grant. And over to staff.
Thank you once again through the chair to director. So yes, just waiting for the presentation to pop up. Just a brief presentation on our 911 answering service. This is the service that supports our North Island 911 Corporation, or our contribution to that organization. And certainly welcome any questions. So of course, the North Island 911, or sorry, this 1593 to provide enhanced 911 emergency telephone number service. This service within the CVRD is funded almost exclusively by tax requisition, and our 2020 proposed tax rate is 0.0279 per thousand, or for a house assessed at 800,000, that would equate to a tax impact of 2232. And of course, all of the jurisdictions within the CVRD participate in the service, so our 3 member municipalities, along with our 3 electoral areas. Quick overview of the service. This service is governed, the 911 answering service is governed by the North Island 911 Corporation. And of course, that corporation is a private, independent, corporation that is wholly owned by its shareholder regional districts, of which we are one. That also includes the School District 69 portion of the Regional District of Nanaimo, the Strathcona Regional District, Alberni, Clayoquot, Catet, and Mount Waddington. And as many of you may recall, North Island 911 also does provide contracted fire dispatch services to the Peace River Regional District. That's been taking place since 2017. And then more recently, we extended those services out to the Cowichan Valley Regional District in 2021. The annual tax requisition in this service is based on our traditional taxable assessed value and supports the CVRD's apportionment of costs due over to the North Island 911 Corp. And as always, we provide a link to the North Island 911 website on this particular side for anyone that wishes to find out more information on the organization. There we go. So a quick overview of the budget. As you can see here, we're proposing a slight increase in the requisition of $65,000. That's largely being driven by a less prior surplus being available from prior year. The operating costs that are noted here of $857,000, those are an increase of $21,000 from the prior year, and those are pretty well exclusively the contributions over to the North Island 911 Corporation, which for 2023 total $846,913. The remainder of those costs are minor amounts for support service and some insurance costs. And just to provide a bit of an update on North Island 911 for your information, We've spoken in the past about the interim cost apportionment that was approved back in 2021. So the North Island 911 board took a look at its cost apportionment model and implemented an interim approach that is now based very similar to the Vancouver Island Regional Library model of 50% property assessment and 50% population based on the federal census. That interim cost apportionment method is due to be reviewed this coming year. So we'll be reviewing that ahead of our 2024 financial planning and bringing back recommendations to that board as to potential ways forward. Updates on some key North Island 911 service delivery contracts. So firstly, with our ECOM 911 public safety answering point contract, we currently are just in the process of signing a third extension agreement with ECOM that will take that contract through to the end of this year, December 31st, 2023. Looking ahead to 2024, we are anticipating the introduction of a new next generation 911 call levy. We are anticipating that call levy to be $104,000 a year over 5 years through 2028, and that will be in addition to our contracted costs as they are currently. With respect to the city of Campbell River, the fire dispatch services contract with Campbell River Fire Dispatch, a 3-year extension agreement was just signed in late 2022, so that agreement will now be set to expire at the end of 2025. With respect to our 2 fee-for-service contracts, starting with Peace River, that there is a new 5-year agreement now in place to support that work, and that's now in place through December of 2027. And then finally, with the Cowichan Valley Regional District, that contract renewal was signed in 2021, so it'll be up again for renewal in 2026. And lastly, just give you a sense of our work with respect to next gen 911 upgrades. We've been continuing to move forward with that and anticipate phase 1 works will be completed in 2023. And then we do have allocations in the financial plan for 2024 to fund the phase 2 works. And that's all I have for this service. As I said, more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any questions on the 911 service? Okay, seeing none, I will call a question of receipt. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
Move the recommendation.
Moved by Hillian, seconded by Arbor, and the recommendation is items on the in-camera. I'm proposing that we move in camera now and finish those items, see how long they take us. And once we come back out, if we have energy left, we'll continue. And if not, we will push the remaining items to the next meeting. Dr. Grieve. Director Grieve, go ahead.
Yes, there's a few things that I think we have to rise and report on from our in-camera. Mainly the appointments for our AAPC and APC.
Director Grieve, that's why we would go in camera and do those items. The suggestion was we would do the in-camera items. It's just maybe pause on the regular items.
Well, I thought you meant you were going to go into in camera. No.
Yes.
In camera so that those
we can rise.
Yes.
Okay, that would be good. I got people bugging me.
Director Arbor.
Thanks. My feeling is that other than transit, the other items might take about 10 minutes. But it's just differing, no, it's true. It's a lot of recommendations being brought forward. I don't think it'll take that long, but I agree with moving in camera. So I move that we go in camera.
Yeah, if we get the in camera over with quickly, then maybe we will feel up to finishing the rest of it. But let's get that done first.
We could defer transit.
Okay.
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah. We've already had our motion to move in camera.